All right, welcome to the Sae Bae cast number 217 with Cimo. Did I say that right?
You
Already.
did. You
Okay.
did.
I already literally forgot because I was saying Simu in my mind for so long. How are we doing today?
I'm awesome. This is just an excuse for me to do 3 hours of agility uninterrupted, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, I've been running rooftops I think for the past like 15 episodes. So yeah, I'm right there with you. So let me. I'm really excited about this episode. One, because I do have a history with Yu-Gi-Oh! And for those that don't know, you are one of the largest Yu-Gi-Oh! Based YouTube channels out there. So I want to get like the whole introduction of who you are, how you got into Yu-Gi-Oh! The whole content creation journey with you. But I just got to say, Yu-Gi-Oh was like my pride and joy when I was in second grade. Like
That's awesome.
that was like the greatest game of all time. My friend got me into it. I mean, I remember having a dark magician, and I remember my friend, he gave me his dark magician because he got a holographic version of it, and so he just didn't
Sure.
want his old one anymore. And then, you know what the first Yu-Gi-Oh card I ever had was though? This
What's
was
that?
this was something that I rediscovered like maybe 3 years ago on my stream because I was like, okay, there was a Yu-Gi-Oh card that I got from my friend. It was the first one I ever had, but I cannot for the life of me remember what it was called. And then we finally discovered it because I kept telling my audience it was red looking, it had a number in the name, and we finally tracked it down after like an hour or something of my entire audience like scanning the internet for it.
Wait. Hold on.
Yeah.
Wait. Let me try. Let me
Okay.
try.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so you said it's red.
Yeah.
And it has a number in it.
Yes.
And that's all you had to go off.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. So it's a monster, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. It's a very old card, I'd imagine too.
Oh yeah. I mean, this was 2002.
Okay. Is it like a very obscure card? Did your audience say that at all? Or did they not? Okay.
It was just like I don't know. It's not a common card at all. That's for sure.
Okay. Because the first thing, when you say it's red,
Yeah.
and it has a number in it, there's this card called like Tai 2. That was like
That is
the first
literally
thing.
it. Dude,
Is it?
if you had been, yes, if you had been in my chat during that, I would have literally, I would have just been praising you because it seriously took over an hour for us to get to that point, and I was looking it up and everything. Like I was like, because I was thinking. I even told somebody, I was like, I think it's like Typhoon or something. It's like something Typhoon.
Yep.
And nobody could get it. And then we finally got it. And it was just like seeing that card again. I'm actually going to pull it up for people.
You should. You should.
This,
That's how you know I play this game too much that it was able to tell you that card in under 5 seconds with that little amount of information.
I love it so much. That is so impressive. Yeah, this was the card for those.
Oh, it's ugly. It's ugly.
It's an ugly. Yeah, I mean, it looks like I don't know what, I don't even know what it is. Apparently it's a dragon, but it just, yeah, so I have aphantasia, which is like I can't see mental images in my mind.
Okay.
So when I'm imagining stuff, it's just this like kind of dark cloud. Less like nothing really pops up in my mind, but as soon as I see something, it's like a flood of memories. I mean, it's just like so amazing. And so seeing this was just like the biggest sense of relief ever. But yeah, this is my first ever Yu-Gi-Oh card.
That's wild. That's crazy. Because like you said, it's a very obscure one. Like typically most people would get one of like the first starter decks. So it would be Dark Magician, Blue Eyes White Dragon if you're a boomer like us.
Yeah.
So the fact that Tai 2 was your first card, that's a good memory to have. It's not even a good card either. It's terrible.
I know it is. Okay, so let's jump into who you are, your content creation journey, and just your experience with Yu-Gi-Oh! And then you do play OSRS, and it sounds like you play quite a bit of it. So let's get into that as well.
Sure, I'm a bit of a closet OSRS player, but it's slowly leaked out over the years. But for anyone who doesn't know me, my YouTube name is Cimo with 8 O's. It's just my last name with a bunch of extra O's at the end because that's what I was able to get on every social media platform 10 years ago. I don't know why it took 8 O's, but it did. But Alex is my first name, if you prefer to call me by that, either way. And yeah, I have one of the largest Yu-Gi-Oh channels. I've been making content for about over 10 years now. It was something that I came out of hiatus. So I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh for Oh man, since the beginning, since the anime first debuted in America, I was a little child, and as soon as I saw the first episode, when Kai was like, "Draw your last pathetic card so I can end this," I was sold. I'm in. Like, sign me up. This is the craziest game ever. So then I got into it. I started just buying cards and playing in tournaments and stuff. Then took a hiatus from the game around 2008. For anyone who's familiar, that was a very contentious point in Yu-Gi-Oh's history where a lot of people quit the game because it was very cost prohibitive, especially if you're a young child that doesn't have a job to get money, because the game was very, very expensive at the time. And if you wanted to compete, you had to spend literally thousands of dollars to have like what the best deck was. It was not even close. So very bad time. So I got very jaded just playing the game, and it's like, oh, this is pay to win, blah blah blah, kind of stuff you hear about a lot of different games. So I went on hiatus from 2008 to 2014, and similar to OSRS, Yu-Gi-Oh is a game that is never a game you actually quit. You just take long breaks. So even during the hiatus, I was always just kind of keeping up with stuff. Just always there'd be stuff you'd randomly see on the internet about different new cards coming out, or if there was tournaments and stuff. I'd always just keep it was always on the peripheral of my life, but I was never actively involved. But in 2014, one of my good friends who I ended up giving all my collection to when I quit, because he still played, he's like, "You should get back into Yu-Gi-Oh!" I'm like, I don't know. It just seems like a hassle. So because I gave him all my stuff the first time, he got me a deck. He's like, "Here, you gave me all this stuff back in the day. I want to give you this because I want you to get back into it because I know how much you liked it." I'm like, "Okay, fine." So then I went to a tournament, and I was playing just some really janky Exodia deck that he gave me. And it was fun. I got to resolve Exodia a few times. I'm like, all right, I'm back in. This is fun. And at the time, I wanted to just re-immerse myself with Yu-Gi-Oh! And kind of just get back into it because I had been away for 6 years. And so naturally, like any teenage boy at the time, I was watching YouTube for everything, because during that time I was really into Call of Duty, Halo, just a lot of gaming stuff. And when I went to YouTube to sort of re-immerse myself, I noticed that there was like a severe lack of content surrounding Yu-Gi-Oh! Or the content that was there, the bar was pretty low. And I thought to myself, well, this could be an opportunity, because I always wanted to do YouTube. That was just something that really fascinated me. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to, since I need to get back into the game, it'd be fun that I can learn. And I always felt that if you can teach someone something at a very fundamental, basic level, that you understand it well enough that you can teach others. So I thought, not only would I educate myself, but I'd help get other people into the game as well, because I could help share that passion that I had for the game and get people just as excited as I was for it. And so that's how my journey began, essentially. And that was 10 years ago now. And so here we are.
Wow. 10 years of doing this now. So
yeah.
What is your content mainly focus? Like, what was the evolution of your content? Like, what did it start out as? What do you do now mostly?
Sure. So the content evolution's actually been very interesting. So initially, I wanted to focus more on the competitive side of content and sort of bridge the gap between being a casual player and a competitive player, just because the gap was so high, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Has one of the hardest learning curves of any game. A lot of people like to say it's like the fighting game of card games, just because there's just so much complexity to it, and a lot of just hidden, obscure aspects to the game that other games do a much better job at sort of presenting that information. And so anything that was really there to sort of bridge that gap to help people get better, that was sort of what I focused on. So it was a lot of very educational content focusing on singular cards in a particular metagame, or eventually it would evolve into just doing full-on guides, kind of breaking down new decks and archetypes and like how they function, some basic combo tutorials, just to get people sort of immersed into the game. I sort of cemented myself as, like, I call it the ESPN of Yu-Gi-Oh!, where I was sort of like a sports commentator, where every week I was sort of bringing people like reports of the metagame and when there was tournaments, and like, these decks did really well, and these are cards you should look out for. Maybe pick these up because these upcoming decks are going to be even better. So you want to have these cards to counter those decks. And so not really anyone at the time was doing this type of content for Yu-Gi-Oh! And so I was sort of one of the first ones to do that. And from there, COVID happened. So this is obviously, 2020. That was sort of my bread and butter, was just being the competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Guy, just kind of helping people get into the game. COVID happened, and obviously this is a game that people play in person. So all in-person tournaments shut down. So competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Ceased to exist. And I thought, well, there goes my entire business model. I need to figure out what the hell I'm going to do now, right? So I had to figure out how to pivot. And this is actually a great bridge into old school RuneScape, because a good friend of mine, Gage, Nim Nim, on YouTube, we were sort of just like spitballing ideas because he was actually in town for a tournament. This is right before COVID happened and everything shut down. There was a big Yu-Gi-Oh tournament in Vegas where I live. And it's funny because it had already broken out widespread in Japan. And since Konami is a Japanese-based company, at the tournament, they had gloves and masks for everyone just to sort of like be careful. But everyone was sort of laughing at the time because we didn't realize what COVID was going to evolve into, right? And we're just like masks, gloves, whatever. Like we don't need any of that stuff. And then it turns out, everything shut down not long after that. So a lot of people dodged a bullet because that could have been like the Yu-Gi-Oh! Super spreader event.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, kind of a nightmare. But in any case, so the crossover into old school RuneScape now is we were kind of just spitballing ideas back and forth. And one of the ideas we had was very similar. I'm not sure if you're familiar with like Lincoln Rarg in the old school RuneScape space, but we had this idea where they had this series called Then We Fight, where basically they started on new accounts, and what they would do is they would play for about 2 to 4 hours at a time, and then at the end of each episode, they would try to progress their account in whatever way possible. And at the end of the episode, they would fight each other. Then the winner would maybe get some bonus for the next episode, so on, so on. And so essentially, we took that concept because, funny enough, even though I'm a Yu-Gi-Oh person, I don't really watch a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh content, or at least less now than I did before. But I like watching a lot of old school RuneScape content because old school RuneScape has some phenomenal content creators. And so we basically just took that concept and just did it, but with Yu-Gi-Oh! So we started at the very first set, Legend of Blue Eyes. We cracked open 24 packs, which is equivalent to a booster box. And then we built decks, dueled each other. And then next episode, we did the next set. We did Metal Raiders. And we basically went through all of Yu-Gi-Oh's history. And we called it the Yu-Gi-Oh! Progression Series. And so we made this sort of like Netflix episodic style of content that the Yu-Gi-Oh! Space had never seen anything like before. And it exploded. It blew up. We didn't have any idea of how well this was going to do, but we just thought it'd be a really fun thing to do. And now we've been doing that for 5 years. We're on the second season of it, and I think we're in like 2020 for the second season, like chronologically. So we still haven't even gotten through all the way the second season. But yeah, that's what sort of started the like Netflixification of Yu-Gi-Oh content in our space. So then it's funny, a lot of my content actually is inspired by old school RuneScape content, but I just Yu-Gi-fy it. And yeah.
That is awesome, honestly. And like you just radiate passion. I just got to say that. Like
Thank you.
I watched some of your videos as well. I mean, you're just a natural at this, like the content creation, and I mean just the fact that it's very clear you love Yu-Gi-Oh! This is not like I need to find something to get into the content creation space. Like you loved Yu-Gi-Oh! First. YouTube was just like the natural pursuit. I still have fond memories of it. In fact, I even remember watching Yu-Gi-Oh! After school. And my parents would bully us over it. Like they would watch it with us. And I just remember I was obsessed with just, Yu-Gi-Oh! The show. And my dad, I just remember distinct moments of him coming in and laughing at how corny it was.
Oh yeah, if you watch it back, it's awful. It's actually like one of the worst shows ever made. But as a kid, you don't see it through that lens, right? You're like, This is just like there's these giant crazy monsters coming out of these cards, right? It was very fantastical. But I think as a kid, that's why you love it so much. But yeah, watch it back, it's awful. It's literally one of the worst things you'll ever watch.
Literally, like 6 years ago, I think I rewatched the pilot in college, and yeah, I was like, holy, okay, now I totally understand where my dad was coming from. Like, this is bad, but as a kid, it doesn't matter about the voice acting. It doesn't matter about the story. It's like it's all about just what you're looking at, and it was just so grandiose. Yeah,
exactly. I don't know if you know this, but we actually got the censored version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Over here in the States. So when 4Kids took hold of Yu-Gi-Oh! To adapt it in English from Japanese, they had to change so many things from the original anime that aired because a lot of it actually isn't very kid friendly. Like if you read the manga or anything like that, there's a lot of depictions. Like they have guns. The Shadow Realm, in quotes, is their version of killing people, but you can't kill people in a kid's show. So they go to the Shadow Realm. They're not dying. They're just, in the void for all eternity, right? So they had to do all these things when they ported it over to us. And so when you actually learn that the real, manga or the real interpretation, it's actually very dark and very messed up. But it makes it all the better when you learn about it because you're like, man, this is even better than I thought.
I'm with you there. Like when it is cool. I'm more of a fan of like that kind of the sort of like dark theme of stuff. Even when it comes to like old school lore, I love like Mauritania. I love the whole Dark Mayor area. I love just all of that stuff. Like that's the lore that really fascinates me. It's like the dark stuff. It's like the Gowers whenever they, I mean, even A Soul's Bane. It's that one where you go in that like crevice right next to the dig site. Like that is just dark. It's like, oh my God. But I'm always fascinated more by the dark.
They were
stuff.
tripping when they made that quest. That's
totally.
For sure.
I mean, that was Andrew Gower's demons just being unleashed into the game, basically.
Yeah. There's a scene. It's in the first season when Yugi fights Kaiba for the rematch. Not long towards the end of the first season, and Kaiba's on the verge of losing the game, but he has to win because he's fighting for his brother. And so basically he goes and stands at the edge of this castle, and in the actual version of the show, he basically threatens to jump off the cliff and kill himself if Yugi doesn't like forfeit the match. But in the 4Kids show, the one that we all watched as kids, he says, "Oh, the residual blast from you declaring this attack might cause me to slip and fall and lose my balance. Oh no!" So it's all like implied. But so I do not envy the people at 4Kids who had to figure out how to like make this suitable for people that are 5 years old to watch this while not pissing off the parent.
Yeah, that is hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. Did you ever touch on like, or I don't know if you ever got invested in Pokemon or Magic the Gathering? Do those have any crossovers now with you?
Not well. Crossover is very funny that you worded it that way. So as a kid, I was never really into Pokemon cards. I did have some, I think, growing up, but very, very few. I was more into the Pokemon video games on Game Boy and such. But I think because Yu-Gi-Oh was the first card game I picked up, I think it's just that classic instance of, because it was first, it was the one I stuck with. I had a couple friends who played Magic when I was a teenager that they would try to get me into it, and I'd play one game and I would say, this is so boring, and we would just go back to playing Yu-Gi-Oh, thankfully. But now it's funny because I do a lot of crossovers with people in like the Magic space, the Pokemon space, etc. Just because it's really fascinating, because a lot of the content that people have come to like recently is we'll just yap about cards for an hour and a half, but basically we'll show each other cards from our respective games, not knowing much about each other's games. And it's funny because what we might think is a broken card in our game is maybe terrible in one of the other games because of the way that each of the games function. So I've actually gotten to learn a lot about these other games from collaborating with other YouTubers who are in those respective games, which has been a lot of fun. And a lot of people really like we just have a lot of discussions about game design and, what is good or bad for a game and different things like that. So it's been a lot of fun.
So that's actually one of the questions I have in regards to like balancing in game design. I mean, is Yu-Gi-Oh a balanced game? I hear the praises of people that play Magic the Gathering just singing about how amazing the balancing is with it, even after just years and years and years of having new cards come out. Is that the case? I mean, I know you're not super into Magic the Gathering, but you have, had some elements of it thrown into your content. But is Yu-Gi-Oh really balanced? Are there problems you have with the card game itself? Are there some cards that are just so overpowered that you talk about, like, this needs to get nerfed or whatever? Or, like, how does the balancing go with Yu-Gi-Oh?
Great question. So Yu-Gi-Oh's interesting. I alluded to earlier how Yu-Gi-Oh is the fighting game of card games. Anyone who's familiar with like Marvel vs. Capcom 3, that is like the best analog to explain how Yu-Gi-Oh works, because Yu-Gi-Oh is the card game that lets you get away with doing things that no other game does. And that's because there isn't a resource system. Games such as Magic the Gathering or Pokemon, they have specific cards that are land cards or energy cards, and you need to have those cards to play your cards. And so the more of these cards you have, you can play bigger, more explosive things, right? Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't really have any of that. Yu-Gi-Oh, you can just kind of send it to 11 immediately and get out, your big blue eyes white dragon as on the very first turn if you really want to. And I'm oversimplifying it here for anyone who doesn't understand Yu-Gi-Oh. But you're able to do the crazy thing in Yu-Gi-Oh immediately. And I think that's one of the reasons why people like it so much, is because it's such a dopamine rush that these other games have this slow buildup of accumulation of resources, and you're slowly putting out larger and larger things. Where Yu-Gi-Oh, you're both just sending it at each other from the get-go. And so at any point, you just feel like you're going to die, and the game is going to end immediately. So you're always on edge, but that makes it really fun. And I think that's like why it has such a cult following, is because it plays really like no other card game does. So from a balancing perspective, that does come with its own unique set of challenges. And as the game has aged, it's 25 years old now, and it's still going. You can definitely see a clear demarcation of how the game has sort of accelerated to a point where it's just absolutely batshit crazy, for better or for worse, depending on your perspective of it. Nowadays, I mean, it's not uncommon that the games only last a couple of turns, but within those turns, both players are using multiple cards, like tens of cards at a time, and interacting with one another within those few turns. And some people don't like that necessarily, because people want a more drawn out, sort of elongated experience. But at the same time, there's just such a high degree of interactivity because each individual card is so powerful that you're just slinging them back and forth at each other, really just trying to, push your advantage or stop your opponent from pushing theirs. And again, like I said, it's just this huge adrenaline dopamine rush that really no other card game really offers that same type of experience. So balancing wise, yeah, there are times where there's stuff that is just really egregious, and Konami has to step in and do what's called an emergency ban list and sort of ban things earlier than they otherwise would. It's not that common, but it has happened. Otherwise, we get ban lists every 3-ish months or so, where they come in and say, okay, here are like the problems, we're going to try to address them. Most of the time they're wrong and don't ban the correct things, but at the same time they're a business, so they also want to make sure that they are still getting their money from like the new product, and that's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah.
But there's highs and lows. That's the best way I like to put it. And I always like to say that people experience the lows of Yu-Gi-Oh! And they deal with it so they can experience the high, because the high is so good. And I feel like RuneScape is similar a lot of the times. You might go through some updates where there's like lulls and maybe not a lot's happening, but when there's just like that one update, like that one piece of content that really sucks you in, you're just on cloud 9, right? You're just in that flow state, and there's nothing that's going to beat that.
That's awesome. Okay, I need to cross this by you. Did you ever play Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories on the PlayStation?
No, so it's funny because I was a GameCube kid, so I didn't have a PlayStation until I got a lot older, so I never revisited it. But I've always seen the ridiculousness that is Forbidden Memories and see people speed running it and stuff. That's a wild game. Wild game.
No, first off, that game is just a flood of nostalgia. I mean, because we had a PlayStation 1 at first, and that was one of the games we got. I think it was a 2-disc, or was it just 1 disc actually? It was in No, I think it was 2 discs, but I think one of the discs was the only one you ever needed to play or something like that. I just remember it came in the big container that should hold like 4 discs. But that whole soundtrack, by the way, like if you play that soundtrack to me, like I'm just in love. I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. But I wanted to ask, because I feel like the way they played Yu-Gi-Oh! In that video game is nothing like in like real life, like how you're playing the card game.
Yeah.
Do you know how it was played in that video game? Like, I don't know if there's been other Yu-Gi-Oh! Games since then.
So I'm familiar. I always say that Yu-Gi-Oh! Had this weird problem, and still does to an extent. Yu-Gi-Oh! Always had this weird problem where, for whatever reason, they tried to their approach from a business perspective to get more people into Yu-Gi-Oh! Was to make it not anything about the actual card game. And I don't know why that is. So that's why you have games like Forbidden Memories that play the way that they do. It took quite a while. The only games that really resembled a simulator for the actual card game, I think the first one was Eternal Duelist Soul for Game Boy, or Worldwide Edition, which was, I think, was the sequel to it, if anyone remembers those. But every other game that surrounded Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories. I don't know if you played Duelist of the Roses or Falsebound Kingdom. Those were also on PlayStation. Capsule Monsters, Dungeon Dice Monsters. There were all these Yu-Gi-Oh! IP themed games, but they weren't the actual card game. And that just pissed people off because people just wanted to have more ways to play the actual card game.
Yeah.
And even now, that's still something that the game does, and people don't really understand why. We don't, because Pokemon has done this, because there was other Pokemon games that weren't just the Pokemon game, right? There was the Pokemon Ranger or Mystery Dungeon or different things like that. But I don't know, those just kind of worked better with the Pokemon model, I suppose. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Just for whatever reason has this problem where it tries to not be Yu-Gi-Oh! And I feel like that's a mistake. And but people, you know, just like you with Forbidden Memories, people just have an affinity for these older games that are terrible, but very funny at the same time.
I just remember, like, as a kid, like it was great. I mean, it was so simple, I feel like, to play.
Sure.
On the video game. It's just like, at least how I recall it being was, and I actually want to kind of delve into this just a little bit because I actually can't remember how you actually play Yu-Gi-Oh! The card game. So I want to kind of get a rundown from you after this. But
yeah,
like how I perceived the game was your base or whatever has a certain amount of HP, and you can put cards in either like vertical or horizontal, and that just means they're in defensive or attack. And then when you attack something, it's literally like, does this have enough HP to kill this monster? And if it does, then it's dead. And then if there's no cards on your opponent's side of the field, then you can just attack its base, basically. And then as soon as they run out of HP on the base, it's over. So what is the difference between that and how the game is actually played?
So that is all correct for the most part. The bigger issue with Forbidden Memories is the fact that you're able to fuse cards together at any time, and cards that would normally not be able to be fused together in these ways that are completely arbitrary and make absolutely zero sense. But it's sort of fundamental to how Forbidden Memories works, because that's sort of like the gimmick of the game. Yeah. So at its core, what you described is correct. It's more of like the gimmicks that they added to it are like something they would have in the anime, where it makes absolutely no sense. And that's the problem with the anime and these other games that they made, is that when you try to play Yu-Gi-Oh! With other people, they'd always play it wrong because they learned either from the show or from Forbidden Memories or from some random thing. And you have to be the bearer of bad news and say, yeah, that doesn't actually work that way. Sorry. And then like you're the bad guy because they learned in a way that was incorrect in the first place.
I just have to jump in and just I completely forgot about the fusing thing. I completely forgot. Like, that is nostalgia 101. Like, that is just amazing. Like, it reminds me of Monster Rancher as well. Like, Monster Rancher, you could kind of like you could like throw other discs into the PlayStation. It would just like make new monsters and stuff. But the fusing was amazing, because what you would do is like, you'd have like, you know, your 5 cards in your hand or whatnot, and you would just like throw them all up and just like fucking pray.
And you just hope you fuse into something, and then if not, you're gonna sometimes you'd make something worse than what you fused with in the first place. Yeah. So you have to go on like game FAQs and look up some spreadsheet that tells you everything to fuse into and how to do it. Yeah. And it's just a mess. It's just a mess.
Dude, when you did hit, because I was never looking up online like what the monster combos were. I was just a kid. But when you got those like banger cards randomly, it just hits
like Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes, dude.
That was the dream. That was the dream.
That was a really common, I guess the more you mix, the fewer options you'd have. But yeah, that Thunder Dragon was so common, it feels like.
Yeah. Well, that was what you were always trying to go for, because that was the best thing you could make.
So let's get a small rundown of just how Yu-Gi-Oh! Is actually played then, for those, you know, maybe that have just like a slight bit of knowledge toward it. I guess you don't need to do it for the absolute noob, but like what is the difference, and especially between games like Magic the Gathering or Pokemon, if there's like...
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can even give you the explanation for people who have no clue what I'm talking about. But
perfect.
So basically, each player starts with 8,000 life points. The goal is to get your opponents to 0. And how you do that is that you have 3 types of cards. You have monster cards, spell cards, and trap cards. So monster cards are the bread and butter. They have stats, and they have an attack stat and a defense stat. So once per turn, you have what's called a normal summon, which means you can either play that card vertically, portrait style in attack position, or you can set that card face down horizontally, landscape style, in defense position. You also have what are called special summons. Special summons usually say on the card, it's an additional summon in addition to the normal summon that you only get one of. So it might say, oh, if your opponent controls a monster and you don't, you can special summon this card for free. So it's a way to just play more cards, and they usually have some sort of restriction on them to do so. Funny enough now, by modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Standards, special summon is no longer special. That should be normal, and the normal summons should be special because you're special summoning 30 monsters a turn sometimes. So that's just the way the game has gone. But before, it might be you would normal summon one guy and maybe special summon one or two, and then you might attack and then end the turn. So those are monsters. They have a stat for their attack points and the defense points, and it's whatever's bigger wins. So if my monster with 2,000 attack attacks your monster with 1,000 attack, it'll destroy yours, and you'll take 1,000 damage because 2,000 minus 1,000 is 1,000. So your life points would go from 8,000 to 7,000. If you don't have any monsters on your field, my 2,000 attack point monster can attack you directly. So you would take all 2,000 points of damage straight to your face. So you'd go from 8,000 to 6,000 in that instance. And so basically you're each just summoning these monsters, slapping each other around, and eventually one of you will hit 0 life points. The spell cards, these are cards that are meant to augment you or give you certain bonuses. Everyone knows Pot of Greed. That's typically the classic. That just says draw 2 cards. So that's just a card that's giving you 2 extra cards. There are some spell cards that give your guys bigger stats to make them larger. There's spell cards that, can destroy your opponent's monsters. But typically spell cards are things to benefit you. And then trap cards, these are cards to stop your opponent from doing things. So these might say, oh, when your opponent declares an attack, you activate this trap card that you set face down, and now, you activated my trap card, and then their monster gets destroyed, right? So you're using your monsters, you're activating spells to augment those monsters, and you're setting trap cards down to sort of catch your opponent in a situation where they're caught off guard to get yourself an advantage. And that's essentially the core gameplay loop of the game. So
now, are your cards shuffled, or do you get to choose the deck layout?
So you get minimum 40 cards to a deck, maximum 60, and you get 5 cards in your opening hand. So at the beginning of the game, you both shuffle each other's decks. You draw 5 cards, and that's what you have to start with.
Okay, so it must be shuffled. There's no version of playing where you can just map out exactly what you want, because I guess you just summon Exodia right off the bat, right?
I mean, you could build your deck in such a way where you're playing all draw cards that you could draw out the 5 pieces of Exodia on your first turn. That is possible. It's not good, but it is possible. There have been combos that you can do that, though. Yes. Is
Exodia still the GOAT? Or has that kind of been bypassed? Like, I don't know.
Exodia was never the GOAT. It was more just like sort of the icon from the anime, right? With Blue Eyes White Dragon, Dark Magician, stuff like that. Unless you're in Japan. Funny enough, Japan, Exodia was before Yu-Gi-Oh! Made its way to the US and other territories. There was a time where Exodia was by far and away the best deck possible. And people have gone back and done historic cross-banlist tournaments with decks from every era. Exodia at full power in Japan would beat modern decks today. That deck was that good.
Whoa.
Which is because basically it had access to every good draw card in the game, and would always, if you went first, you would draw Exodia on your first hand like 80% of the time. It was unbelievable how stupid it was. At that point, you're just playing solitaire. You're just playing solitaire at that point. So obviously they had to do something about that. So
yeah. That's crazy. Yeah. So the other question is, so you have 40 to 60 cards. Now, how long do most games take? Like, are you going to run out of cards ever? Like, is that ever the case?
Typically not. Mill strategies or you decking yourself out are pretty rare by modern standards. Back in the day, that wasn't uncommon, but it was never like the best way to play the game. Again, unless maybe in Japan, after Exodia was the best deck, Mill became the best deck because it countered Exodia. Because if you milled away one of the Exodia pieces, then they couldn't win the game, which is very funny.
Wow.
Milling is to remove cards from the top of your opponent's deck to the graveyard immediately. So if you would just mill away the head of Exodia, they had no way of getting it back from the graveyard. So they couldn't win. There was no feasible way for them to win the game, which was very funny. But yeah. So typically in tournament settings, you get 45 minutes to play a match. A match is best 2 out of 3. So, your average game of Yu-Gi-Oh!, if you're going based off that, it's going to take about like 13-ish minutes, but sometimes you might have a 30-minute game 1 and your games 2 and 3 are 5 minutes apiece. It just sort of depends on the way that the game is at the time, the way that the decks are playing at any given moment. Some decks are very fast and can win the game very quickly. We call those aggro decks. And some decks are very slow to win the game. They're called control decks because they're trying to whittle your opponent out of cards rather than win through sheer damage as fast as possible. So there's little micro archetypes within each of the cards.
Now, how many decks would like a really good player have? Like, do they kind of shuffle around their decks? Like, okay, this is going to be a deck I'm going to use here, and my opponent's not even going to know I'm going to be using this deck. Or do people mainly just main a deck and they're like, this is just my goat?
I would say both. I think your more casual average player probably just one tricks a particular deck that they really like. And then the more competitive players are going to hop around to figure out what the best strategy is at any given moment. And just depending on the circumstances, there might be some environments where there's only one deck that is the best deck. We call those tier 0 formats because if you're playing anything else, you're just, you're shooting yourself in the foot because you're just going to lose. But I would say more often than not, we have, in terms of a tier list, there might be a set of tier 1 decks that are like, these are the best decks you could be playing. There might be 2 to 4. And then, your tier 2 decks, there might be a few of those that are good, etc. So the better players are always trying to figure out what the best deck is at any given moment. And they will hop around like it's nothing because they spend 80 plus hours a week grinding this game.
Wow. Now, how much of this game is luck, would you say? And the reason I ask that is because, a game like chess, for example, if you're better than your opponent, you're going to win.
Sure. There's no luck at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But with this, how much of an element of luck is there really? Is it really heavily dependent on your deck? Is there a way to minimize the luck so you could play a really, really, really controlled, balanced deck and basically up your odds all the time? Let's hear it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's definitely a misnomer with Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically, but I think card games in general, is that because it's cards, I think people immediately want to attribute luck to a lot of things. But with Yu-Gi-Oh! Especially, Yu-Gi-Oh! The way it's designed, there's a lot of ways to minimize luck as much as possible. It is still a card game, so luck is going to play a factor to some extent. But with Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a lot of cards that we call tutors. So what a tutor is a card that says, when you play this card, get another card that has these sets of attributes on it, right? So it's like, for instance, if I say, I'm going to play this card says add a dark monster from my deck to my hand, or add a fiend monster from my deck to my hand, or in the instance of your Taihone 2, add a fire monster from your deck to your hand, right? So a lot of these cards essentially tutor for other cards. So you might play one card that tutors for card X, and then card X will tutor for card Y, and so on and so on. And you're playing multiples of all of these cards. You can play 3 copies of a card in your deck at maximum. So you're able to, because of the design of the game, play in such a way that you can execute whatever the deck is trying to do very consistently, almost across the course of every single game that you play. Not every game, of course. There is going to be those few games that every now and then you're going to do what's called bricking, where you have a hand that doesn't do anything. But for the most part, especially the decks that are very fine-tuned for competitive play, they're going to execute whatever their game plan is almost every single game. And then you're going up against your opponent, who's also got their deck like a well-oiled machine, executing their game plan every single game. So then at that point, it becomes a battle of, of wits to figure out like who has the better, who can play better at that point. And that's just some of the best Yu-Gi-Oh! That you can ask for.
Now, are there players in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Sphere that are just the GOAT? I mean, just like people that are just never hardly beaten, that are just, universally claimed as like the best? Or is that kind of like always kind of shuffling at the top?
There's definitely the names up there. Some of them now are content creators, which is fantastic. Jesse Cotton, Joshua Schmidt. These are world champions. They've won countless tournaments and topped plenty of other tournaments. Topped meaning you get into the top 32 or top 64 of a several thousand person tournament. A lot of accolades and sort of the metric for how you know how good you are at the game is how many tops you have, how many wins you have. If you've won the world championship, for instance, these are all the metrics that we use. But Joshua Schmidt, Jesse Cotton, you can look them up. They both have their respective YouTube channels. They do a phenomenal job of helping other people just get better at the game. Kind of like what I did when I first started playing, but they actually know what they're talking about.
So, how would you rate yourself? Like, are you a pretty good player, or are you more in like the teaching sphere, sort of just organizing stuff, kind of like the ESPN channel? Like, how would you rate yourself as just a player?
Yeah, I really like the ESPN sports analogy because what do they always say? They say coaches don't play, coaches coach, right?
Yeah.
I like to liken myself in that category. I wouldn't say I'm bad at the game. I've played long enough, and I'm decent enough to hold my own. But I would not say that I am nearly up there with anyone who's actually good at the game in any capacity, if that makes sense. So I'm above average at best.
What would it take to get better? I mean, is it just a matter of understanding so many deck combinations and like figuring out like just understanding strategies in almost any situation, or is it a little bit of poker face, like because you don't actually know what your opponent has, sort of? So it's like I don't. How would you get better if like that was your pursuit?
It's really just putting in the reps. 87 agility, by the way. It's really just putting in the reps and really just understanding the game as much as you can. At any point in a tournament setting, there's only going to be a handful or a pool of cards that you're going to expect to encounter, right? Especially at the top tables. Like I said, when you're looking at that tier 1-ish category of like 2 to 5 decks, as long as you understand those decks and how to beat them with whatever deck that you're playing, you don't have to know all, 10,000 plus cards in the game. Because, yeah, there's the 0.1% chance you might encounter something that's completely, rogue and out there. But statistically speaking, you're going to see those tier 1 decks more often than not, especially the further you progress in the tournament and you start playing the better players. So putting in the reps and really just understanding why the decks are good, what are the win conditions of these decks and what their weaknesses are that you can exploit. That's really what it is. And that's something that's always been at odds with content creation, is that we always said before how you kind of have to pick between being really good at Yu-Gi-Oh! And being a content creator. And when it comes to like Jesse Cotton and Joshua Schmidt, for instance, they were really good at Yu-Gi-Oh! Before they were content creators. Where for me, I was focused specifically on creating content to just like help a lot of people rather than my own career as a Yu-Gi-Oh! Player and like being the best that I can be. I just felt that was the role that I wanted to play. And so, yeah, the better I got, the more I could help people. But I was more interested in finding ways to not only educate people, but entertain people as well. So I decided to relegate myself to the entertainment side of things on YouTube more than, playing hundreds of hours of Yu-Gi-Oh! A week to try to get really good at the game.
Okay, so I want to hear a little bit about your old school history, old school RuneScape. Do you play RS3 at all? Like, did you play RuneScape back in the day as a kid and then jumped onto old school, or are you just like an old school specific?
I was about to say, this is a RuneScape podcast, and we've yapped about Yu-Gi-Oh! For an hour now. I started playing back in pre-EOC. So this was actually probably when I was playing Yu-Gi-Oh! To start off as well. And yeah, I remember I had a friend show me the game one day, and then I just got hooked. I remember just, killing hill giants in the Varrock dungeon, just like northwest of the West Bank or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I would go over to my friends' houses sometimes who weren't even into RuneScape, and I'd be like, "Hey, can I use your computer? I just want to kill some hill giants while we're just hanging out, right?" And they would just like laugh at me. And I had fun memories of just my friends on summer vacation. I'd have them come over. We'd all have our laptops or our PCs, and we'd just have like a little LAN party and just order pizza on the weekend and just chop trees and watch movies. And it was a good time. It was a good time. But So I started very early on, so I got to experience some of these skills as they came into the game, like Hunter and different things like that. And then we got EOC era, and that's when we got summoning, and we're like, oh, this game sucks now. This is not fun. And I have a good memory of. I remember this is before the wilderness ditch existed. I did get lured and I lost everything that I had as a kid.
Oh man.
But yeah, so I'm very grateful the wilderness ditch exists now because of that. I don't remember how it happened, but I remember just being in shambles. And I remember I was like crying to my mom about it. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to use this opportunity to rebuild my account. And so you know what I did? I went to go chop magic trees. That was a great idea because magic logs were like 1.5K each back then or something like that. I'm like, damn, I'm rich. This is going to be a great rebuild.
No, you were exactly me. I was a woodcutter, and chopping magics with the Giga Chads out there was. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't even care about the GP per hour. It's GP per resource. That's what I focused on.
Exactly, GP per resource, precisely. So yeah, that was sort of my my initiation into old school RuneScape. So EOC came around, and so we had summoning and we had dungeoneering, and I remember at that point I'm just thinking I remember going through, they removed free trade and the wildy was ruined, and I do remember though you could lend items to people, which is really cool because it created this little micro economy. Because I remember I just had a whip, but some people didn't have whips, so you could just lend your whip out for like a few 100K for the day, and it was just a way to make money just because you had a whip. It was pretty cool. So I kind of missed that system, but yeah. So it was EOC was just I'm with everyone who if we're gonna quit, if all the companies are going to come and ruin the game a second time, I'm banding with everyone. I will quit as well. That's totally fine. Because I saw the game ruined once. I don't mind. I don't want to see it again.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I took a break from that. And then I actually want to say it was when I was getting back into making YouTube content. I think that same friend, Gage, I think somehow we got into just starting new accounts on Old School. And we just wanted to play together. So it was fun because we did all our questing together just because it was a way for us to just shoot the shit and just have a good time while we were just, just knocking out whatever quest that we had to do. So it was fun because I had a friend that we were sort of like always together at like roughly the same levels. So we were always able to like engage in content together, which was cool. And then from there, so that was my main. And I remember I had a memory where this was a couple years ago. Everything was crashing in price, and I don't remember if it was a botting issue or what the reason was. But I remember the Tebow dropped to like 950 mil, which was insane, especially now when you look at how much Tebows are. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was like really saving up for a Tebow. And my friend Sonic, shout outs to Sonic, he's the homie. We were just talking in Discord, and I'm like, man, I'm so close to getting the Tebow. Like, it just keeps dropping in price. He's like, all right, I'm just going to hook you up with 50 mil. Just buy the Tebow. It's never going to be this low ever again. If I ever need 50 mil back, I will let you know. And he's never asked me back for it, by the way. He's like, but if you ever need it, like just buy the Tebow. So I sold my whole bank. I bought the Tebow, and then I started doing the Tebow rebuild. But then I realized that, I don't know, the game just became so much about just like doing maximum efficient GP per hour, and it sort of just like ruined it for me in a way, which is crazy because I got the Tebow, the crazy mythical weapon, right?
Yep.
And that's when I'm like, yeah, I don't know. This isn't as fun as it was before. And so then being a lunatic, I started an Iron Man, and I haven't gone back. It's been great. Because I needed to spend 6,000 hours to get that Tebow instead of actually, just buying it off the G.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right. Like, eventually, I think for a lot of players, they hit a point where like main is super, super, super fun, but you hit that long-term goal of getting that item you wanted or something. And I think if you're conscientious enough, you start understanding like everything I'm doing is just about doing the best GP per hour method. Yep. Or else I'm kind of wasting time. So where is your Iron Man at this point?
So just crossed the 2,000 total threshold. We're in the red prison for the time being.
No.
I actually put off the red prison for a bit. I got like 50-ish KC because that's when they announced that the Royal Titans, which at the time we're recording this, they just came out today.
Yep.
They're giving us the prayer scroll upgrade. And I thought, oh, well, that's actually just straight up a buff to doing CG. So I may as well just wait a couple months for this to come out just to make my life a little bit easier. So that came out. I need to grind that, and then we'll probably just put ourselves back in prison. But yeah, that's where we're at. But 2,000 total level. I've got a pretty decent account, all things considered. I'll screenshot you just like stats and stuff if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been fun.
What's your RSN for those wondering?
It's not Cimo.
Wait, it's not Cimo? Like, just like that, that's the name? It's not Cimo?
No, not Cimo.
Oh,
so
not
not,
Cimo.
and then Cimo with 1-0. Cimo with 1-0.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that is a beast account, man. Have you gone?
It's not bad. It's not bad.
Have you gone dry on anything yet, or are you just hitting that stage? I mean, you said you're in red prison now, so it's just like I could see this maybe being the point of no return where things start going south. But have you experienced any like horrible luck yet?
I'm trying to think. I've actually been thoroughly enjoying Red Prison. I'll be honest. On my main, I'd done like a decent amount of raids, but it was nothing like too crazy. But sinking my teeth into CG has actually been like really, really fun. It's just I've been thoroughly enjoying the challenge of it, and I don't know. It's been fine. In terms of like super dry grinds, I'm on the Warhammer grind too. So I have Shamans unlocked for Slayer just so I can just do it passively for the time being. But I think I'm not even like halfway to drop rate yet on that. And I'm not even like really worried. If I get it, cool. If not, whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think if there was anything in particular I went super, super dry on yet. I think I got 2 KC Ranger boots. That was not dry.
Oh, that is the dream, actually.
Yeah. That's how I knew my account was somewhat blessed. I guess my fish barrel I was a bit dry on at Temporos. That was not particularly fun. But
I'm looking at your farming skill. So are you? Let me just ask because you're 105 farming, and I don't. Okay, you have a few other 99, so it's not the only 99. But is that? Okay, listen, I've never been a huge fan of farming, but on this account, when I'm in more of a sort of I don't know, burnt out phase or not really sure what to do, I will still continuously do my birdhouses. I will do my farm run. I'll do my Hespori. I'll do that. Is that a case of that? Or
no.
Do you just love farming?
I just love farming. I sent you my main account, which is just my YouTube name, the Cimo with the 8 O's. I have like 60-something million farming XP on my main, but I was going for Tango Root, to be fair. I just went super dry on Tango Root on my main, which sucks.
Okay.
I don't. Farming's just been my favorite skill. I don't know why. I guess that the children yearn for the farm. I guess, but it's just something that's super chill. You just plant some stuff and then you come back and play later. Because I try to play as much as I can just because I love the game, but I am limited, especially with content creation. So a lot of the stuff that I do is, I try to just AFK as much as I can in the background. And farming's just like the best AFK skill because I don't even have to be actively playing. And I know with Iron Man specifically, I basically have 99 herb banked from all my farming. So
that's amazing.
It's great. Yeah, I just have to actually grind it out. I'm at 90 right now, which is, pretty much the threshold for most things that you actually need. But I just really need to just get the GP to go to Zahar or whatever just to make all the unfinished potions because I'm not sitting there for 40 hours making unfinished potions.
Oh yeah, dude, never do that. Yeah,
never. But yeah, no, I just like the AFK-ness of it, I suppose. And I need to get Tangle Root on this account too. So
yeah, dude, my Tangle Root luck is so crazy because I
saw.
You saw that, right? Like,
yeah.
I never got one on Sae Bae, 69 mil farming on Sae Bae.
Insane.
And then my next group hardcore, I get 2 Tangle Roots with no other pets. And then on this account, my first pet is a Tangle Root, and I have no other pet. So it's like 3 back Tangle Roots. Like
that's wild.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Very bizarre.
Yeah.
I'll probably get another one too. I honestly am expecting it now. Like whenever I go to a tree patch, there's actually like a fear in me that's like, don't get another one, please.
I'll take it for you.
Yeah. So
I've gotten Rocky and 2 squirrels on this iron so far.
I cannot get a squirrel to save my life, and it's so annoying. On any account, I just can never.
I'll trade you a squirrel for a Tangle Root. How about that?
I will 100% take that. Yes. Oh my gosh, yeah. So I want to touch on So are you still playing your main account? Like, are you still maxing it on the side, or have you just like full sent the Iron Man?
Nah, I full sent the Iron Man. It's just this is something I wanted to talk with you about because I feel like. We talk about this all the time, but I feel like that just sense of progression. I think what I love so much about Iron Man is that everything matters. And yeah, obviously there's like ways to cheese around some things, right? Like with smithing, you can still just buy gold ore and just train your smithing that way, right? But for the most part, your skills actually matter towards your account progression and unlocking things for the game. And I understand that some people might think that that's tedious, but I feel like that's just so important for it just makes the game feel so much more complete. Whereas when you're a main, half the skills don't actually matter in the slightest because you just buy everything. And those milestones don't exist. But when you get 90 herb lores in Iron Man, you're like, oh yeah, like this is like a huge milestone, right? Because it's like you unlock your super combats or your overloads for chambers, right? Or just like all these little things like Slayer. Then all of a sudden now you can just get the items that are locked behind Slayer, and like I said, it just makes the game feel so much more whole and complete that I love it. I just love that seemingly endless sense of progression. I know you're also very much a big fan of that as well.
Yes. Yeah. No, Iron Man is something special. Plus the fact that there's just no microtransactions in Iron Man. Like, there's very little in old school in the first place. There's just bonds, which is like the best form of microtransactions if you were to add them. But yeah, Iron Man is just so pure. It's so good. If they ever desecrated that, it would just be devastating. But I
also like too that it forces in quotes, it forces you to engage with the content, right? And again, I know doing some of these tedious, laborious grinds people may not have fun with, but I actually think it's cool that on the Iron I was getting to do stuff that I never had to do on my main, such as Corrupted Gauntlet, right? And I know for a lot of people that is like sort of that's the trial as to whether or not the Iron Man is going to progress if you get screwed out of getting your enhanced. But I actually on my main I had zero reason to do CG, and it's some of my favorite content in the game. So I'm so happy that by pursuing Iron Man I actually got to experience that. And granted, I could have done that on my main, but there was no reason for me to. So it's this sort of extrinsic motivator that I need to go do this, rather than intrinsically I decide, I want to go do CG.
Exactly. And have you rated at all?
Yeah. So on the Iron, I've got some Toa under my belt. I have Light Bearer, which is cool. I have my pouch, my upgraded pouch. I've had that for a while actually. I think I got the thread on the first Toa that I did with my friends.
Nice.
I've had the 4-slot pouch for almost the account's like entire progression, which is cool. And so we got some Toa under the belt. Nothing too crazy. We ran like some like 180s, 220s or something like that in like a trio. But I can hold my own in Toa. I've loved learning Toa too. I know it's probably like everyone's least favorite raid of the three, but I like it. I think because of Yu-Gi-Oh! I like the whole Egyptian theme of it. And it's fun content. I think it's good. I did Chambers on my main for quite a bit because I had some friends that were really into that. I didn't do any TOB yet. That's the only thing. I did some in leagues, and that's about it. Just doing the Night at the Theater for the quest. So I've done that, but I really want to get to TOB on my account at some point. I've got friends that are waiting. They're like, "We'll take you. You just got to get the requirements." I'm like, "I'm trying."
Yeah. So what about Infernal Cape? Like, is that on the list? Like, have you gotten an Infernal Cape, or is that something you aspire to get at some point?
Yeah, 100%. Never got one on my main or anything like that, but I was getting to the point where once I was doing the T-bow grind, I was like, oh, cool. This was like sort of one of the biggest, granted, that's like self-limiting belief, but I really wanted the T-bow before doing Inferno.
Oh, yeah. If you can get it, you might as well. Yeah.
Exactly. So that was sort of my next step with the rebuild, was to kind of get all the things in place to get to go for Inferno. But that was when I started getting burned out on the main, and so that's when I started up the Iron. But I would love to get an Infernal Cape at some point. A lot of people want me to make old school RuneScape content, so that'd be, especially to be able to like show that to everyone and that like evolution and progression. Yes. I think that'd be awesome. So maybe one day. But I have my fire cape. I'm not that bad. I can get fire capes like no problem. That's
the crazy.
I'm not a noob like that. So
the best thing is getting an Infernal Cape on an Iron Man, because it's like it's just so fulfilling, so satisfying knowing you built an account from scratch, no trading, and then you pull off an Infernal Cape. It's just, I don't know. There's something special about that. I love it. It's difficult.
I'm so excited for it.
It's definitely for a lot of players, it's extremely stressful when you've never done it before. It's like, oh my God, like eats you alive just thinking about it. But honestly, when you jump in, things start clicking and it's like, okay, we got this.
I'm one of those people that's sick in the head though, and I love jumping into really difficult content. Like I was always one of the people who, when I would play a video game, I would always default started on the hardest because I wanted to just have to like just play it as hard as possible or how it was intended. Sometimes it's very cheap one-shot mechanics, things like that. That's like every video game though. But I don't know. I was always sort of masochistic that way. Like games like, Super Meat Boy or, Call of Duty on Veteran or just anything. I loved playing on the hardest difficulty because it felt so rewarding when you actually beat the content. Where if I beat it on normal difficulty, it never really felt fulfilling to me. It's like, oh yeah, I could just walk through this.
Let me ask you, did you ever play Age of War? Like that online game?
No, I didn't. No.
Because it's such a classic game. If you heard the soundtrack to it, you would I think everyone's heard the soundtrack to it, but it's just a simple like game where you just like summon your enemies, and then the bot is summoning enemies on the other side, and you just like bash it out, and then whoever like basically destroys it's honestly kind of Yu-Gi-Oh esque, but
interesting.
That game has a few difficulties. There's like easy, normal, and then like impossible or something. And impossible is stupid. Like I'm pretty sure people have beaten it, but I think the only way to beat it is to actually like solve it. Like you need to know exactly what to summon at what times and whatnot. And it's so extremely masochistic. I was curious if you played that, because that's like the one version where I'm kind of with you to some extent, where like playing the harder difficulty feels like you're actually playing the game, like how it was almost intended. But no, there's certain games where it's like, no, this is not going to fly. Like I'm not doing this to myself.
It's like when you play Fire Emblem on Lunatic and everything just crits you all the time.
Yeah, but I'm kind of with you there. That's cool though. I think that's a good mindset to have as a gamer. Just like jump into the deep end and just, don't be so scared.
Because I mean, we just as people now, like we want to challenge ourselves, right?
Yes.
And so like some people like want to go in toe first, just get their feet wet, get used to whatever mechanics, and then they go for the harder stuff, right? But I don't know, trial by fire, man. Just send it. You learn a lot faster when the pressure's on, right?
It's true. And it's just a game. That's the thing that
it is just a game. Yeah.
Yeah. It's easy to forget that this is just a video game. It doesn't matter if you die in this game, just
right.
Respawn.
Exactly. I mean, you just, you lose. I think the biggest thing that people fear is the sunk cost fallacy of time.
Yes.
Right. Because especially with Inferno, for people who are not as experienced, even for fight caves, right? That you're not getting that hour or that 2 hours back again. And then it's the daunting thought of having to do it again and again. And it just feels like you're wasting your time. And I think to most people, that's what they fear more than the items lost in terms of supplies. Right. Totally.
Would you, so you were, saying, you maybe have some interest in like making old school RuneScape content. You would do that on a separate channel, is that right?
No, actually, it's something I've been going back and forth on recently with my audience, because I already have the built-in audience, and you'd be surprised, the crossover between like Yu-Gi-Oh and old school players and creators is actually massive. It's crazy to me how many old school creators know us and how many how many of them that the Yu-Gi-Oh players know. I don't know what the reason for that is. I'm not sure if it's because both games came out like sort of in a similar era. I'm not sure if we're just they hit the same neurons for dopamine for us. I don't know what it is, but probably a lot of people, because I'll go to tournaments and meet people all around the world, and they all play RuneScape as well as Yu-Gi-Oh, and they have like maxed accounts and everything, and it's just like I don't know. I can't explain why. So I technically already have the audience built in that I wouldn't even have to necessarily. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
That would be amazing, honestly, to kind of mix and have you done any old school content at all on your channel yet?
I wouldn't say directly. My friend and I, the one Gage, the one that we film our series weekly with one another, we had a side bet one episode that whoever lost had to do an hour of rune crafting in max weight, and this is before the agility changes. And I lost that one. Great. So I live streamed it, and everyone was just coming in, and they're like, "Why are you in max weight? Why aren't you doing this?" Like the whole point was so that it was inefficient and wasting our time, especially with rune crafting. So we made it like into a joke, and that was a fun stream. That was a really good time. So I've done things like that. I haven't done like a direct here's a old school RuneScape video, if you will. It's been more just like I'll talk about it on Twitter because I played leagues this past league and got to like rune rank. So like I was talking about that a little bit. I'll post like tidbits here and there, but nothing like directly onto the channel that's like this is an old school RuneScape video.
Yeah. Have you heard about Project Xanaris that's going to be coming out?
I have. Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, I was just thinking, they've done certain things. I think there's like Pokescape, I've heard, and there's other little sort of crossovers with old school. I think Project Xanaris, probably not on release for sure, but later down the line, if it's successful, I could definitely see people making like different universes with the old school feel, like the old school mechanics. But I'm just imagining now like somebody coming out with a Yu-Gi-Oh! Old school crossover through Project Xanaris where you're like summoning monsters basically.
Battle City and Gillinor.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm down.
Yeah. It wouldn't even have to be Gillinor either, because they could like map edit and like make it into like Yu-Gi-Oh! Universe.
That's true. Yeah. I think Project Xanaris is really interesting. I know a lot of people are sort of hating on it, but I think just from I think because I'm content creator brained, I think I see it through a different lens. I think it's just a really cool opportunity that I'm genuinely surprised they didn't do sooner. I remember in one of your recent podcasts when you're talking to Mod Matt K about this, I'm just shocked that he brought this up to them and they didn't go after this sooner, because I think RuneScape is the perfect game for doing Project Xanaris. And I think it's just from a community building perspective, which is what has kept this game alive for as long as it has. I think it's going to be really beneficial for the game in the long run.
For sure. I think a lot of it is like, usually when I hear the hate, it's usually just fear. It's like something different. And I think there's so much fear built up from like EOC and other huge changes they've made to the game where it's like, what are you doing? Stop it. And yeah, it's probably largely based on fear. And for me, like, yeah, there's like an element of like, this could potentially be bad. Like this could have negative consequences, but I try to see the long term of it. And I'm like, there is so much potential for a system like this to come out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you just look at how creative some of the content creators have gotten with just the base game, right? Not even, with any of the stuff that's been assisted with like prop hunt or anything like that. I mean, you have like just any of like the restricted Iron Man accounts, or just any the crazy lunatic accounts that you see that are doing like the most restrictive things imaginable, or there's like, I can keep going on, right? There's so many things that people have come up with the base game. So now give people the dev tools to be able to modify things at will. The possibilities with it are endless. And so I think that I'm excited to see where it goes. And I really hope that the proper tools are given to the creators so that they can really take advantage of it. My fear is that they half-ass it and they don't give the creators enough freedom, enough customization to really just sink their teeth into it and do some really cool stuff.
You're right. That would be a detriment, I think, if they didn't give us the tools necessary. I think, just long term, I think inevitably we'll get more and more and more freedom and tools. And I wouldn't be the one designing these places, but I would just love to see. I mean, we have such a crazy creative community.
Absolutely.
I mean, just the fact that we have RuneLight, it's just like, bro. And the wiki, like the wiki and RuneLight, like we have people that are not even paid to just design the coolest stuff ever.
But that's just how dedicated of a fan base that OSRS really has.
Yep.
Right. I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh! Similarly. I mean, I honestly, old school RuneScape probably has like one of the most dedicated fan bases of all time. But I would say Yu-Gi-Oh!'s up there as well. And especially our content creator space, we also come up with just some really crazy creative stuff for a game that has been the same game for 25 years. Right. So I'm excited. I think I understand people's fear too, because at the same time, they want things to sort of, we talk about being in the golden era of old school, right? And I think people just don't want to lose that because that's just the nature of human thinking a lot of the time. But at the same time, I also don't think Project Xanaris is necessarily directed towards the core audience. I think from a business perspective, yes, the content creators can use Xanaris for a lot of community building stuff, sure. But I genuinely think that the appeal here, and this is sort of in line with leagues, I think these are all aims to broaden just the general player base as a whole, not to really cater to the existing player base that exists. Because if there's other ways, similar to leagues, that we can get more people into the game, that's like RuneScape, but not like the actual RuneScape, how is that a bad thing? That's a net positive at the end of the day.
Yeah. Okay, one of the things that we have not touched on is Call of Duty, which is something you kind of had mentioned. Now, so let's touch on some of your thoughts behind the blend of OSRS and Call of Duty. And I guess if you want, you can get a little backstory of my Call of Duty experience. It's not much, but I feel like, well, I'll start, I guess. So my Call of Duty experience was my dad was against any rated M games when I was a kid. So basically we couldn't play any like shooters. And then something happened, I think in high school, where like we were testing the waters. Like my brother and I were like playing shooters. And then I got like a PS3 from Craigslist, and I like bought Modern Warfare 2, and I was playing it. My dad would walk in occasionally, and it would just always be kind of awkward. I'd hit the pause button on multiplayer and die, you know, just repeatedly, just like, you know, just gotta like wait for him to leave, sort of. But he definitely knew we were playing it, so eventually he just kind of silently accepted the fact that we were playing rated M games. He just stopped caring. But my friends and I, we'd go over to my friend Jordan's house, and he had this big theater in his like house. It's just a super rich kid, and we would play Call of Duty there like overnight, like all the time, and it was just absolutely amazing. And we would play local there, and then whenever I was home, I'd play online. And I mean, I was just obsessed. And then I never really got into other shooters, but in college, I had like PUBG Mobile when it first dropped. I had this other game called Critical Ops. So I've always had like an affinity for first-person shooters, but Call of Duty was definitely like my first love. Modern Warfare 2 in particular.
I tried to explain to my wife what a special moment in time Modern Warfare 2's release was like. I don't think we will ever experience anything else like that in our lifetime. And it's such a surreal moment to look back on, because that was literally the life of every teenage to like 25, 30-year-old male in the entire world when that game dropped. It was unbelievable that those moments are some of the best that I cherish from my childhood. But I have a similar story to your rated M story. So my parents were chill. That wasn't really much of an issue. Yeah. But my grandma had just passed away, and so we had to fly out for the funeral. And this was over the time that Halo 3 was just getting released. Speaking of huge game launches, Halo 3, obviously M-rated game. And at the time, I believe I was 15 or 16, so I wasn't able to technically, buy the copy for myself. So my eldest cousin, who was a Marine, obviously was there as well. And after the funeral, he just taps me on the shoulder. He's like, "Hey, let's just go mourn and buy Halo 3 at midnight and just like play all night and just like, shoot away our sorrows, basically." So we go and we go to the store, and it wasn't a GameStop. It was wasn't Walmart. It was Meijer, is it called? Some store in the Midwest.
Wait, Fred Meyer or whatever?
I don't know. It's like Myers something. It's some like Walmart equivalent.
Yeah, Fred Meyer's.
Okay, sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. yeah. That's just a really common store around here in Oregon. So just.
Okay, sure. Yeah, we don't have it in Vegas. Oh, okay. So that's I couldn't remember for sure. So that's where we ended up buying it, which was great because there wasn't that many people. Where GameStop had like 200-300 people waiting to pick it up. So I guess we just got lucky. And I remember this like elderly woman hauling out like on a flatbed like all the stuff, because some people had collector's editions, things like that, and these like 20 grown men just like clapping and cheering for this woman bringing this stuff out, and she's just shooting us the dirtiest look, like, you guys are all a bunch of nerds. But anyway, I get my stuff, my cousin gets his stuff, and we have to go from the back of the store where all the gaming stuff is to the front of the store to check out. Yeah. And I go to pay, and the cashier is like, "Oh, I need to scan your ID." And I said, "Why?" She's like, "Because you have to be 17 to buy this game." Before I say anything, my cousin, like I said, he's a Marine, immediately positions himself between me and the cashier and just straight up dead in the eye looks at her and says, "Okay, I'll buy 2." She shut up, he paid, and we left. It was so funny.
Oh, that is amazing.
Yeah. So then it was great because since it was on East Coast time, my friends are all on the West Coast. I texted them pictures. I'm like, I got it 3 hours early, fuck you, all that stuff. So that's that story. But yeah, Call of Duty, I remember I had a friend, he got Call of Duty 4. And he said, "Hey, come over. Like, I got this new game I want you to try." And I remember I played that. And I was hooked. That game was just dopamine, adrenaline inducing. And, Modern Warfare 2 was obviously the apex of that, but it all started with Call of Duty 4. And it's interesting when we talk about RuneScape and how much progression matters in gaming, because Call of Duty 4 was meant to be like the Halo 3 killer, because Activision was trying to find a way to take on Bungie and Halo and Microsoft. And it's funny because Call of Duty 4 was the first shooter to implement these RPG progression style elements into an FPS. And when you look at it versus Halo, obviously Halo is very typical. Like your weapons are all on the battlefield. You know, you all start with the same stuff. You can pick up weapons when they respawn, but that's it. You all start with the same kit. But Call of Duty 4, and then obviously subsequently Modern Warfare 2, you have the different perks to modify how much starting ammo you have, your movement speed, your default starting weapon, and all these different things. And that sense of progression, I love talking about game design stuff. Like that sense of progression, I feel like is what really hooked me onto Call of Duty as much as it did. And then obviously Modern Warfare 2 took it, you know, to the next level because it was even more customization. And I feel like that's why customization, or not customization rather, but the progression of, oh, you level up, you now have access to a new gun. Oh, you level up, you have access to a new perk, right? It's so similar to the OSRS model where it's like, oh, you level up, you can go kill this new monster. Oh, you level up, you know, you can do this thing, right? It's always giving you something to continuously look forward to. And that's just why I feel like that progression model works so well. I always say if someone can make like a card game that has a progression model similar to that, I will give my life to that game. That will just be the best game.
Do you think... So I remember in Modern Warfare 2, there was such thing as prestiging. So like you get to level 10 or whatever and you reset or however it went. Like, do you think there would be, first of all, do you think that's good game design? And do you think they should do something like that, like in old school?
Ooh, like a prestige system in old school? I see. That would be interesting because there's always the discussion right now around sailing that all the maxers are dreading it because they're going to lose their max cape privileges, right? But the hallmark of MMOs is that people like flexing, right? You know, Zuckhelm, rare pets, you know, just all these random achievements. That's the end game of any MMOs, to be able to flex on other people. And so let me ask you, would you prestige if that existed on Sae Bae?
I think it would be so interesting to... So, first of all, I don't know how prestiging would exactly work because...
Well, let me give you an example. Let me give you an example. Okay, let's say everything resets. I was going to say, that's... If we're going based off of COD, that means you would lose literally everything. You would literally start over, but then maybe there's like some symbol next to your name. Maybe I'll be nice. Maybe you get to keep your pets. You get to keep your pets. That's it. Everything else is gone. Your items, everything. You have to start over. Would you do it?
I wouldn't unless there was some sort of like, this actually means something. Like if people saw it as meaningful, like then there would...
Sure.
But the problem is like, so I'm imagining prestiging such as like, I don't know, just getting 99 in a skill and then you can like reset it to 1 again. But you have like another perk now. Like you have like an additional perk or something. You can prestige it several times. I just don't think it would ever actually work in old school just because of how long and drawn out the game really is. It would be different if it was like a League's version of it where everything's way shorter. But yeah, I mean...
But people like flexing. That's the thing. True. It's hard to say, right?
It's true. It's totally true. Yeah. And then you would have these people that, you know, have already gotten 200 mil all, and they're like, well, what do they do? Do they just get like an instant like 15 times prestige that they chose to? And you're just like, I don't know, but
it would be kind of interesting if you had a sort of XP multiplier if you prestige. So it's like, okay, you're resetting your account to basically get this prestige, but you know, maybe they throw you a bone. It's like, okay, all your XP is 1.25x, right? So it's not as long of a grind as the first time, but you do still have to grind it again. So maybe they could throw a bone like that, but I don't know. I think, like I said, I think people like flexing. I do think there'd be a very small percentage because imagine you're prestige 5 and you have a Zuckhelm again, right? Like that's, I don't know, like the fact that you played that much, you're just a lunatic at that point, but I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting to think about.
Let me ask you this. Did you play Medal of Honor before Call of Duty? At all?
I didn't play it before. I played a little bit of like one of the newer ones, I think, but I never played like the old Medal of Honors.
Okay, because when I was a kid, I remember Medal of Honor being kind of the GOAT. You know, they never got super popular, but Call of Duty and Medal of Honor were kind of in the same sort of boat. And then something happened where it must have been Modern Warfare 2, or maybe it was just Call of Duty 4 that like really.
And it was COD 4.
Was it that?
It was COD 4.
Was that just like the thing that just shot it up and Medal of Honor just died basically?
Yeah, because Call of Duty 1, 2, and 3 and Medal of Honor were sort of competing with one another because they were both like the World War II games, right? And so they were kind of offering similar experiences just with their respective developers and how they wanted to tell those stories or how they wanted the player to engage with it. So like I said, first of all, Call of Duty 4 was a modern warfare experience. I mean, it's in the name, but also there hadn't been really a game up until that point, except like maybe Ghost Recon, if you remember that, like Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter. I think that was like one of the first 360 games, if I recall. That was a modern setting, but that game sucked. So that that didn't really help it. So when Call of Duty 4 came along, not only was it a modern shooter when I think people were getting really sick of the World War II genre, but again, it did something that other shooters hadn't done up until this point because they had all been following the sort of like Doom model or Quake, where it's, you know, you're in this arena and there are these weapons kind of all over the place and you go pick them up and just kill each other. Like, cool, fun, great. But there wasn't really much innovation in the space up until COD 4. And I think COD 4 is really what just shifted the genre entirely because now a lot of these, I mean, Halo ended up taking notes out of Call of Duty because they started adding the ability to change your weapons prior to actually playing the game or added little perks and different things like that. So that was their response in Halo Reach, Halo 4, etc. To Call of Duty. They had to evolve as well. So initially it was Halo that I feel like was sort of leading the pack in a lot of ways. And then introducing that progression RPG-esque model that we love so much in that, in RuneScape, etc. I really feel like that's what sort of catapulted these games, and now we're on like Call of Duty 43 at this point, and it's basically the same thing. So now we're kind of sick of it, but it's been around since what, 2007 now, so it's been a while.
Yeah, dude, I just remember getting Modern Warfare 2 for the first time and playing it, and I was like, dude, this is.
It was a religious experience.
I just remember, I mean, the graphics were just insane for its time. Insane.
Yeah. Yep.
And like the story was awesome, and like the campaign or whatever it was called, and then I always just wanted to immediately jump into online and just
100%.
Oh my god, man, so good.
I remember just having friends in high school during the time, and the game was so popular that we were playing Ground War 9v9, and we had too many people who wanted to play with one another that we had to like cast people out, be like, sorry, you know, like we're going to play with the best 9 people of the group, but we'd have like 14 people wanting to play. So we had to like make selections of who we were actually going to play with. And it kind of sucked because, you know, it's like, you know, sorry, if you're not good at the game, we don't want to play with you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we just had so many people that wanted to play. And I can't remember a time where so many people were genuinely that excited about the launch of a game. And that lasted for months. I remember it took forever for us to finally whittle down the amount of people that just wanted to play with everyone. It was crazy, but it was so much fun. So much fun.
Did you play Guitar Hero at all?
100%.
Okay.
I'm a huge rhythm game guy.
Yes. Dude, Guitar Hero, Call of Duty. I even had my Minecraft stint just a little bit.
I think everyone had their Minecraft stint.
Yeah. Sure. But were you good at Guitar Hero? Like, did you like?
I was pretty good. Yeah. Like, I mean, I was doing stuff on Expert. I wasn't like playing tournaments or doing any crazy, you know, some of the stuff you see on YouTube where people are like, oh, I'm going to play this blindfolded for 30 minutes straight. No, I'm not doing any of that stuff. But I was decent enough. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. No, Guitar Hero was like my jam. I just remember, I mean, I still have these moments where I cringe. You ever have those like evenings where you're like in bed just about to go to sleep and you think of like the most cringe thing you've done in like your childhood? Yeah. So one of the worst cringy moments ever was, this actually just, it's hard to even like express how embarrassing this was, but I thought it was cool at the time. I thought it was cool at the time. So listen, I'm in middle school in 8th grade. And I was really good at Guitar Hero, probably the best in the school. And the only reason I knew that is because, well, one, I would fucking put in like 5 hours every day after school playing Guitar Hero, just grinding it out. But on top of that, like I was, you know, gold starring some songs on Expert. There was this little festival like in our middle school during like some fundraiser or something, and they set up like these projector screens to you know, play Guitar Hero and like duel people. And I was there, and like, you know, the person that lost had to leave, and I was there for like 2 hours straight. And then eventually, like, I didn't even lose. I just like gave up the controller, and everybody was like, dude, this guy's a god. So And I wasn't like, trust me, like I eventually met people in high school that were actually slightly better than me. And I was like, oh shit. Like I thought I was like the GOAT. Clearly I'm not. These guys are actually better. But at the time in middle school, I was amazing. And I pulled up to my choir class during 8th grade. And this is so fucking embarrassing. So fucking embarrassing. But this is when I believe Guitar Hero World Tour had come out, which you could make your own songs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I remember that.
And I was pretty into music. I could read sheet music and stuff. And so what I did is one of the songs we were like learning in choir, I literally just like made the song on Guitar Hero.
Oh, okay.
And so, I was just thinking, oh, this is like super fucking cool. It sounded like shit because Guitar Hero World Tour just had these annoying electronic instruments playing everything. So it sounds horrible. But I just remember like I recorded me playing the song and I sent the video. And so at the beginning of choir class, I went to my choir teacher. I was like, hey, like, can we like play this? Like, look, like I made our choir song into Guitar Hero. And in my head, I'm thinking like, this is gonna be so awesome. Like everybody, all the girls, all the guys, like we had, probably 70% girls, 30% guys in the choir class. I was like, this is going to be awesome. Like everyone's going to think I'm awesome for doing this. Dude, he played it at the beginning. Like he put it up on the projector in choir class and just played it. And I just remember it was just silent. Like nobody cared. Like,
oh no. Oh no.
And I'm sitting there like halfway through it. I'm like, turn it off, please. Just turn it off. Like, this is so fucking bad. Like, this is so embarrassing. Cause it was just like quiet and the song sounded annoying and nobody cared. And I just remember it finally ended and I'm just sitting there like in complete embarrassment. Like, holy hell. Like, why did I do that to myself? Like I just straight up outed myself as the most cringy person in this whole choir class. Like,
and then you're like, I'm gonna go play RuneScape.
Yeah. No, it was bad, man. Like that, it's
wow.
To this day. Like I can't even do it justice. But just the amount of like crickets in the room and just like nobody caring and just people like, what the hell is this? Yeah, it was bad.
It sounds traumatic.
Oh, it's very traumatic. I still think about it. Like,
yeah. I got a couple of good Guitar Hero stories. The first one was when 3 came out. I remember, I think I was asking my parents for it for Christmas. Mm-hmm. And I recall I walked into my parents' closet one day because my mom or my dad asked me to get something for them and bring it to them. Mm-hmm. So I walk up the stairs, go to their closet, bring them whatever. And I shit you not, 2 seconds after I walk in, this large object just falls from the top of their closet. They had like a pretty tall closet.
Yeah.
Just falls like a meteor just hit the earth. And it was Guitar Hero 3. And I'm just like staring at it. And my mom is like, well, do you want it? I guess you can open it now. It was like 2 weeks before Christmas.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, great, cool.
That is amazing.
Yeah,
that's a Christmas miracle right there.
Yeah. And then the second one, speaking of traumatic, I actually did a focus group for Guitar Hero Aerosmith when they started doing all the weird like branch offs of Guitar Hero.
Dude, I had Aerosmith and Metallica, by the way.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I was all about it.
So, so I was like a teenager that didn't have a job. And so I was looking for just random ways to make money. You could just do these random ass focus groups. And so they're like, oh yeah, like we'll pay you a few $100 to give us feedback on like these advertisements for Guitar Hero Aerosmith or something like that. So I'm like, cool, great. So I go to this place. I'm there for a few hours with all these other people. And I shit you not, they literally show us like the same ad or like variations of the same ad like 500 times for these 3 hours. So I literally have walk this way stuck in my head for like years because I had to listen to the intro to Walk This Way for 3 hours nonstop. Like it was some social, like psychological experiment.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it wasn't as traumatic as what you experienced, but now every time I hear that song, I'm partially triggered. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, I bet. Oh my gosh. There are some songs to this day that will just piss me off, and it's because I just relate it to a certain annoying moment in my life or something. So I could totally understand that.
Yeah.
Guitar Hero.
Great game though. Great game.
Yeah, Guitar Hero Aerosmith was kind of like the easy mode version. There was no like Through the Fire and Flames on that version.
Oh, okay. I stopped at World Tour, so I didn't actually play that.
Yeah. I mean, even like World Tour, like Guitar Hero 3 was the GOAT. That was the one I just went to town on. like the songs weren't covers at that point. Guitar Hero 1 and 2 were just like covers of him.
Right. Well, that was to save money and to avoid legal issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Guitar Hero 2,
fine.
Guitar Hero 2 was genuinely difficult. I mean, the hammer-ons you had to be so precise with. Yes. Yeah. And Jordan to this day, I believe is the only song I never could complete.
I couldn't either. Yeah, same.
It was just brutal. And the thing is, like, I never owned Guitar Hero 2, so I could only practice it at my friend's house. And yeah.
That made it even more difficult then.
Oh, it was so
limited
hard.
Practice. Yeah. I remember like trying to like practice through the fire and the flames, or just like certain like really difficult parts, like they're escaping me now, but there's like maybe the solo in one on Metallica, like things like that. I remember being in class trying to practice like the finger motions, like just like while I was just sitting there, like whatever the teacher was just spewing at us. I remember just in there, just like practicing like with my fingers, trying to like get the motion down. Because once you get the motion down, it's not bad, but it's like that learning curve of getting it. But then once you finally achieve it, oh man, we're talking about difficult games. That's such a satisfying game when you finally like surpass something. Dude,
you saying practicing in class, I would actually do that as well.
Yes.
Dude, listen, this sounds so crazy, but what did we get? It was like I told my dad to literally make like a miniature version of a Guitar Hero controller out of wood. Out of fucking wood. No. He actually did. Like we went over to this like shop and like started carving out a Guitar Hero controller out of fucking wood with like buttons that couldn't be pressed, but just like little wooden like pieces for the frets. I swear to God, like I'm sounding so insanely nerdy right now, but like I actually did that, and I just remember in bed. Like I would be playing with this little teeny like wooden thing and just like practicing and just imagining the notes coming down because I was just so obsessed with like mastering these songs. And then in school, the same thing without like actually I wasn't bringing a fucking controller to school, but like I would imagine playing. It was crazy how addicted I was.
My God, I love that though.
Yeah, those were just truly the good old days. Guitar Hero World Tour though, the only real reason I love that was because of the music studio. You could go in there, make your own songs. I would like print out sheet music. So obviously that really embarrassing story of me, making the sheet music from the choir class, making that, and I hate thinking about that. But on top of that, I would go onto these like sheet music sites of video game sheet music, and I would make songs. And like I loved sharing those to like the marketplace on it. It was like that was how I enjoyed the game.
I played piano growing up, so I would do the same thing. Not for Guitar Hero, but I would always go and find the video game sheet music on some third-party virus-laden website, most likely. And that would be because I remember I always, when I was being taught, I always hated the songs that I was learning because they were just they didn't have any meaning to me. That had no attachment to them. But when I'm looking up, especially like Final Fantasy specific soundtracks or different things like that, like some of the there's some beautiful piano work in so many different video games, but. I'm here learning fucking hot cross buns or whatever. And I'm obviously exaggerating, but I'd like to learn something that has a bit more, meaning, a bit more, depth emotionally. And yeah, that was awesome. Did you play anything else besides you were in choir? Did you play any other instruments or no?
I played clarinet for 5th and 6th grade, and then 6th grade I was actually I was in choir and band, but you could only have one elective, and I was just one of the like rare students that was in both. And I just remember my choir class I hated. Like, so half the time I'd go to choir, half the time I'd go to band, and every time I had to go to band, I hated it. I was like, I hate this. I want to go into choir. So that's when I basically quit band.
Why'd you hate it?
Just the kids were weird. That's literally it. Like, it was just like the room was darker. The choir teacher was annoying. The kids were weirder and not as talkative or popular. It was honestly just a lot of like that kind of like petty stuff. Like
anyway, how's RuneScape?
Yeah. I mean, you got to keep in mind as well, like choir had all the cute girls, so it's like every time I'd go to choir, it's like, okay, I'm around like all the cute girls and like some of the cooler guys that I'm more friends with. And in choir,
band is the Yu-Gi-Oh players. Yeah, I get it.
And it was more relaxed. Like you could just like chat with your friend. Like in band, it was like North Korea there. It's like no talking, like fucking, learn the sheet music already. Choir was
very
so much more
militant.
relaxed. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's funny. It's funny you say that though, because one of my best friends growing up, he was also in band, and I'm laughing because he said the exact same thing to me.
Yeah.
So it's funny that you had that shared experience.
Choir-
I thought that was just like his specific, like that's just how he experienced it. But the fact that you're saying that too, I'm like, okay, maybe that's like a lot of band experience.
Yeah,
they take it way too seriously.
I think it is. And luckily where I grew up, like choir was a huge thing. Like we won state championships and stuff.
Oh,
for, like,
wow.
our
That's
6A
awesome.
school. So like it was, we took it a lot more seriously. And I was actually pretty good, especially like in high school. I became a bass. Like my voice finally dropped freshman year, like massively. I was like a super high tenor right before that. And then all of a sudden I was like recalibrating how I spoke. I was like, holy hell.
Puberty's a hell of a thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Like, I feel like it doesn't sound like I have a deep voice, but man, my voice was like pipsqueak, like in middle school. And then it just dropped to where it is. It was crazy.
That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah, Call of Duty, I mean, Guitar Hero, Minecraft. I wasn't playing RuneScape around then, but like that was also the glory days of mobile games. Like I had an iPod Touch and I just loved mobile games. Like did you ever get into any of those?
Not really. I think I'm trying to think of, because I remember when like the iPhone first came out, I remember there's like the dumb games, like just popping the bubble wrap and any sort of like, cookie
Doodle jump and
type random. Yeah, just all the random stuff that came out then. But no, I was never really a mobile gamer. I think just because I was pretty exclusively on console at the time. And that's where my friends were, right? I mean, I'm grateful that all my friends were like Xbox people because we all were on the same console together. That just happened to work out that way. Yeah, I mean, I think we were just exclusively on there. I was never like what mobile games did you get super into?
Well, I just remember that was truly the golden age of first-person shooters on mobile games. There was this game called Modern Combat 2. It was like a Game Loft game. And
I've seen them. Yeah.
Yeah, the best part about this era of mobile gaming was not every game was like a cash cow. Just like, okay, we're going to try to milk our,
weird concept.
Yeah, just like or just a bag of gems for $99.99. Buy it. The first thing, like first advertisement in the game pops up. It's like, no, this was back when you would buy the game and then you would just play it, and there was no in-app purchases really. Maybe there was a few, but Modern Combat 2 was like the greatest experience for me because I just decimated people because I had the new iPod Touch which had gyroscope. So
I remember when that was popular.
Yeah, this app allowed you to use gyroscope. So a lot of you're facing people that weren't using this new technology. They were just, if they had to aim, they had to put both their thumbs on the screen and try to like kind of like meticulously aim. It's
like a modded controller, basically.
Oh yeah, I was the guy that would rest my elbows on my bed. I'd be playing on my bed, and everything is gyroscope. So I'm just moving the device with like peak precision. And this game was so fucking imbalanced that I would just rock an AK-47 and use it as a sniper without ever like actually aiming, because what you would do is like like the crosshair, if you headshot people, one shot was instant death. So I am like and the thing is like these maps were so like shittily designed where there's there's not much variation in the ground level. So if you're standing at a certain height, you're basically in you're in headshot range of basically everybody, as long as you kind of keep your crosshair level. And dude, I just remember the other thing is I am so like, I have pretty good pattern recognition when it comes to like spawn points and stuff.
Sure.
I just remember I kept kind of testing the waters. I'm like, okay, how far can I get into these people's base before their spawn point switches to the other side, And I just remember I would find these certain points where they'd keep spawning in the same place, and I would just fucking spawn camp. I'd be headshotting spawn these people, and it was so fun because it's not even like ranked matches where you're going up against people that are actually good. It's like everybody sucked, but and they weren't bots. These were real players. Like this is before they started flooding games with bots, dude. It was dopamine fucking heaven. It was amazing. Like there is nothing better than a video game where you're constantly one-shotting people in the face and they're players. Like there's nothing better than that.
You know you're hooked on a game when you're like obsessed with the game outside of the game, right? Like so take RuneScape. When
Yeah.
when you leave your desk and you go do something, you know, work out, go run an errand, whatever,
Yeah.
and you're thinking about, okay, so when I get back, I'm gonna go do this. Like when you start doing that, you know it's bad, right? And so I remember with like COD 4 specifically, I remember with my friends and I when we'd be at school, we would be. It's funny you talk about this because we would be. I'm not sure how familiar you are with like the maps in COD 4, but if you remember Shipment at all,
Yep.
Shipment was the smallest map and was just basically a square. It was a square that had like some shipping containers, the smallest map. It was for 12 people. Probably not for good for 12 people because I think there was not enough spawn points that on the initial spawn, 2 or 3 people would overlap with one another. So you just instantly die if you got the bad spawn in that case. But I remember we were similar that outside of playing, we were trying to figure out like where the spawn points were and then like how to manipulate them before people really got like super in deep with these games to figure out how to do that stuff. And we were doing the exact same thing, but for COD. And so God, those are like such good memories. And I just remember we're like, you know, screw school, right? It's like we're just thinking, okay, as soon as we get home, what are we doing when we get on COD? Right. And the microtransaction thing's interesting that you bring that up because again, I really love game design. There's a really interesting video if you want a good watch for some point when you're just like grinding agility or whatever. I think it's called "What Went Wrong with Gaming," and it's like a 30-minute sort of documentary style piece. And it's interesting because it sort of maps the trajectory of how microtransactions sort of entered the gaming sphere. Because you're right, like you said, initially games weren't like how they are now. They weren't like RS3. They aren't like, you know, basically every game that comes out now where the companies are trying to extract every last dollar out of the player base. And so it's interesting because they talk about like the very first instances of I don't know if you played the Elder Scrolls at all growing up, but the horse armor. You could buy armor for your horse in Elder Scrolls, and it didn't do anything. It didn't give like the horse stats or anything or give them any more protection. It was purely a cosmetic item that you could buy for your horse to make your horse look, you know, like flex. Like it was just like a way to flex, and it cost like $1 or $2. It was a very insignificant amount of money. And it's funny because a lot of people laugh at the concept of horse armor, but it was an instance of one of the very first microtransactions that entered the game that wasn't like something tangible like DLC maps, right? Remember back in the day, they would give us map packs for like $10, $20. You get 4 or 5 new multiplayer maps to play Halo, COD, whatever. That's when that slowly started to come around too. But the horse armor was paying a microtransaction for something that didn't even affect gameplay whatsoever. It was like purely a cosmetic thing. And it's even stranger because Elder Scrolls is a single player game. So it's not like you're playing with other people who are going to see this armor. It's just because like you want it. Right. And so that's like one of the very first instances of microtransactions all the way back in 2006, 2005. I forget exactly when. And so it seems so innocuous at the beginning, but it's sort of like what we're talking about now in the old school RuneScape discourse, like with CVC and all the stuff with the membership changes and everything, where it's like if you let them if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile sort of thing. Right. And that sort of was like the breaching of the dam for gaming as a whole for them to start adding these microtransactions into the game, because then you start seeing the implementation of like weapon skins and things that are purely cosmetic and don't affect gameplay. But then we start getting things that do affect gameplay, like maybe specific different weapons, like in I want to say it was Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. It was one of the newer CODs relatively that they started adding in like loot boxes that you buy in the game. And there's like better guns than the ones you unlock through natural progression or better variants of the weapon. And so if you're lucky enough to get that, you're more OP than everyone else because you have the OP weapon, right? And so then it starts feels bad because now it's like, oh, you know, I have to, you know, gamba my way to get like the best weapons, and that feels like shit, right? Because it doesn't matter about player skill or anything. It's like if you equal playing field, if they have the better weapon than you, 9 times out of 10 you're just going to die because they have higher DPS, right?
Yeah.
So it was just this slow implementation over time of things that didn't really seem that bad. And now we get to the point where gaming now is, I feel so bad for my sister. She's about 10 years younger than I am. And the way she has experienced gaming is so depressing because everything's just microtransaction laden. She never got to experience the time before like we did, where gaming wasn't like that. It was this more pure experience. When you buy the game, you get the game that you pay for. And you know, most of the time it was actually a complete experience, where now games are just half baked. and they just ship them anyway, and they're like, oh, we'll just fix everything later. And it's sad. It's really sad what's happened to gaming.
It
just
really
overall
is, man. It's like, and I think I'm a bit blinded by it because I just focus on old school RuneScape for the most part.
Same.
Like I've spent some time outside of it, but honestly, most games I dive into, besides a few, have just actually depressed me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, like again, like I was saying, I had this phase of being into mobile games. I remember distinctly that sort of enshittification, like coming into mobile games. There's like every single thing is like, how can we milk our player base to their last dime? And it's like, damn, this is like actually so depressing.
And now it's just every game. That's the sad part. You can't escape it. And I think that's why our community is so, steadfast in wanting to keep and preserve old school the way that it is, because this is like almost one of the last bastions that the enshittification hasn't touched yet. And it's scary because it's like, it's on the peripheral, like they're trying to implement it. And I love seeing our community band together to try to, push back to some degree, right? But it's scary because I think this is something that is so pure and still so organic and especially nostalgia driven as well, that I don't think we want to lose that. And I'm happy that we at least can band together still, and at least it makes a lot of the news sites when our community does band together, which is really cool because who would have thought this 2005 point and click game would still be relevant in the public discourse.
Yeah, no, and it's really, really cool seeing us all band together. It actually is. Like, it's just, oh, okay. We haven't all just become so nihilistic for it. It's like, oh, okay, well, they're going to destroy the game anyway, so may as well just let them.
Right. Well, even recently with the Delve Boss proposal, right? They actually today, not long before you and I started recording, they actually are going to push it back, and they're not going to pull. And I'm like, that's crazy. That because we saw like yesterday or the day before that it seemed like they were gonna go through with the poll, and they were just ignoring everyone. And the community actually pushed back that they listen. And I think as much as people can whine and bitch and complain, I think that we do not give our JMods and everyone working in that company enough credit that we are so blessed that we have a group of people that are willing to like work with us on the game that they create, because every other company out there, it is like the exact opposite experience. And so we do not give them enough credit and praise for how good we have it compared to a lot of other communities. But I think that's why it makes us so special.
I'm totally with you. I try to make that point quite often. Just like the devs we have are just amazing. And
with how open they are too. Like some of the I didn't mention this earlier on, but I was telling you before you and I filmed that you actually were the #1 YouTube like creator that I watched in 2024, according to my YouTube little analytics thing that they do at the end of the year.
Totally honored by that, by the way.
But it's great because I told you I really love game design, and some of my favorite discussions that you've done are with Mod Ash, Mod Kieran, Arcane, and really learning about just sort of how they dealt with certain issues with the game, how they overcame them, how they approached them, just like the balancing aspects. I live for that stuff. As I've gotten older, I've just really loved sort of the tinkering and how all this sort of comes to fruition at the end of the day. And you're providing that content that really no one else is. So while I'm doing a lot of work in the background for Yu-Gi-Oh content creation, I just have you on in the background, and I love listening to the discussions that you have. So I just wanted to commend you for doing that, and I hope that you keep doing it.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I 100% will. I love talking to the JMods. They're amazing.
Yeah, and they're all fantastic people. And so the fact that they have that level of transparency, or that ability to publicly communicate with people like you or any of the other content creators, so many other companies fear their employees like talking like that in a public setting because of, for whatever X, Y, or Z reason, because, they're trying to, preserve whatever it is they're trying to preserve, or they're more conservative, or they're more old school in, the way that they do business or whatever. But again, we have it really, really good. And I feel like I said, I know our community can sometimes whine and bitch a lot, but we definitely cannot take what we have for granted, truly.
Totally. I want to take a slight turn back to Yu-Gi-Oh and ask about, because I see old school as still in this quote unquote golden age. I think we have a really phenomenal game right now. Yes, we've gone over some shaky ground just in the last month or so, but it sounds like I still feel like we're in that age. And I want to ask on Yu-Gi-Oh, like, do you feel like there were some certain golden ages? It sounds like 2008 was like the horrible, like the dark ages, just because of the price of cards and stuff. But have you seen these ebbs and flows of golden ages and stuff over Yu-Gi-Oh? And are you currently in one, would you say?
That's a good question. I think every community probably has those highs and lows, right? I would say Yu-Gi-Oh probably has more lows than highs in my experience, but I've been around a long time. I think it depends on really what you like. I've sort of relegated myself now to more of like the retro Yu-Gi-Oh scene. And by that, I mean, so there's the main way to play the game, which is advanced constructed is what we call it. And that's, if you were to go watch a live stream tournament, like we just had one this past weekend that had 2,300 people in Orlando, that's like how the game is played today. That is 25 years of what Yu-Gi-Oh has become, right? But I more so now enjoy playing older Yu-Gi-Oh, where it's we have alternate formats where we sort of go back to 2005, like what were people playing in 2005 or 2010. That's the most popular version of playing this retro format. It's called Edison format. And the reason for that is it comes on the back of the dark age of 2008, where everyone was really jaded about the game. But 2010 specifically was this really interesting, unique era because it's sort of a combination of playing really old boomer Yu-Gi-Oh! That people sort of like joke about, that it's like really slow and not like what advanced constructed Yu-Gi-Oh! Is now, where it's really fast and there's like a lot of stuff going on. It's just different flavors for what people are interested in. I guess the equivalent of that for RuneScape would be, you know, do you want to play a main or do you want to play an Iron Man, right? I think that's like a good way to look at it. And so 2010 Yu-Gi-Oh! Is sort of this interesting hybrid where it's not exactly the slower, more meticulous old Yu-Gi-Oh! That a lot of people might remember either from the anime or from playing growing up, but it's fast enough that you can do some like really cool things without it being overly broken, and nothing in that format is overly broken. There's a lot of really good things, and there's a lot of opportunity to play 20 different decks that are all competitively viable. And that's why a lot of people have gone back, because they really like the fact that the games last several turns. There's a lot of long-term decision-making, where in like modern Yu-Gi-Oh, you have to do all of that decision-making up front. So in this, you have to think over the course of multiple turns, how is the game going to play out? And is that going to be favorable for me to make X, Y, or Z play, right? So I've really enjoyed that as of late, and a lot of people have as well. The retro tournament got 330 people at that tournament that took place this last weekend. So it's a lot smaller than modern Yu-Gi-Oh, which makes sense. But it's still something that's growing, increasing in popularity over time. So a lot of people are looking back to that now as like a golden age, just because it sort of embodies all the best characteristics of Yu-Gi-Oh that people really like. And a lot of like top players in modern Yu-Gi-Oh are sort of defecting to this more retro Yu-Gi-Oh because they have a greater appreciation for it compared to not wanting to play the current format. And that's okay. Everyone can play what they want. So 2010 Yu-Gi-Oh is a really good time right now. There's other golden eras too, like in when was Duelist Alliance released? 2014, 2015, I want to say. There was this really big set called Duelist Alliance that sort of introduced 3 to 4 really, really good decks all at once. And they were all very fun and interactive decks. And that's a time that people just really enjoyed playing the game. They got a lot of people into playing during that time, just because everyone was having so much fun playing the game. But then there's plenty of bad times as well. Like I said, 2008 was really bad. A lot of the early 2010s were bad because there was a lot of ways to just kind of win the game immediately on the first turn, and it wasn't very fun. Like there was one deck that could rip all 5 cards out of your hand on the first turn, so your opponent just didn't get to play the game. You know, that's great. Fun time. And then 2018, 2019 was very interesting because there's a really good era of Yu-Gi-Oh! Called TOSS format, TOSS, TOSS. Each of those letters stands for a specific deck during that time. So it's an acronym for Thunder, Orcus, Sky Striker, and Salamangreat. Those 4 decks were all very, very fun and balanced and very... they all played really well against each other. They weren't really doing anything unfair to let the opponent not play the game. So typically the environments where people both can interact with each other really well are looked at as like the golden eras. Unfortunately, that came on the back of one of the worst times to play Yu-Gi-Oh, where there was decks that were ripping just your whole hand out again, just decks that were making it so that you just literally couldn't play the game on your first turn. It was a really, really shitty time to play Yu-Gi-Oh during that time. Jeez. So definitely a lot of ups and downs for sure. But I would say 2010 is really good. 2005 is really good. That's called GOAT format. 2010 is Edison format. The Toss format that I mentioned is a lot of fun. Duelist Alliance format is really good. So it ebbs and flows just like RuneScape. It's really no different.
I'm curious, like, about how card games in general, specifically Yu-Gi-Oh! In this case, how do how do they decide how many cards are printed, and like how do they decide, what the rarity of cards are and stuff like that? I feel like this is a question that I feel like I've had, but I've never been able to like ask anybody. And it's just like, how does that whole work? Like, how does that whole thing work?
This is contentious.
Okay.
So, so how they typically work is, I believe Yu-Gi-Oh works in 2 to 3 year dev cycles. So they know the cards that are going to come out in 2027 at this point, which is good because it helps them sort of design. So they'll design a set, and then it's like, okay, we know these cards are good. So how are we going to compete with these types of cards? Because something with old school that we always talk about is power creep, right? That's obviously been a big issue with like the Delve boss and everything. Power creep is also something with card games that is quite common. And so how most card games deal with this is that they have what's called a rotation. How rotation works is every card that was released within the past 2 to 3 years is legal for competitive play. But then once a new year of cards comes out, the oldest year is no longer playable anymore. They rotate out is what they call them. So this is a way that a lot of companies use to sort of keep the game in check. That way, if there's something that's too powerful, eventually it will rotate out of the game so they don't have to worry about it for too long. Or it's a way that they can sometimes just curb the power of the game so that it doesn't get too out of hand. Yu-Gi-Oh! Being the black sheep of card games is what's called an eternal format. That means that we can play cards that were printed all the way back in 2002. So Exodia, Blue Eyes, all these cards, Pot of Greed's banned, but hypothetically, you could play with these cards that you had when you were a kid. And that's also something that people really like about the game is that theoretically speaking, if you have these really old cards, they are still playable. And you don't have to worry about, they rotated out or anything like that. That has its pros and cons because obviously if there's a really old card that wasn't designed with 2025 Yu-Gi-Oh! In mind, all of a sudden it becomes broken overnight because people figure out some degenerate combo and they have to ban it usually on the next ban list or whatever. But in any case, so they usually work in these 2 to 3 year dev cycles. And like I said, most companies have set rotation, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Is an eternal format, so we get to play with everything. What happens is that for Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically, the cards come out in Japan and the Asian territories before they come to what we call the TCG, which is the US, Europe, everywhere else in the world. So Japan is actually a few sets ahead of us right now in terms of like the whole card pool. And that's how it's always been. They're usually 1 to 2 sets ahead of us, which is nice because we can see those cards ahead of time and sort of plan ahead for when they get released here for us. But it also kind of spoils the fun. A lot of games have like spoiler season where they announce new cards and people get excited for them, but we already kind of know what they are, so it kind of like ruins it for us. Yeah. But that's kind of neither here nor there. In any case, so when these cards come from the Asian territories to the non-Asian territories, they actually change the way that they are distributed and the way the rarities are allocated to make it so that, because they know in America and Europe that we have like more disposable income, essentially. So they make the cards that are really good when they realize that they're really good in Japan. So sometimes a common card might become like a secret rare, which is like the highest rarity a card can be for us, keeping things simple for those listening who know what I'm talking about. They'll make a common card that might be $1 in Japan, a secret rare, and it's like a $50 card for us in the US because they artificially make the card more rare. And that's always a big point of contention because it's kind of dumb because they're just artificially doing this because they know people are going to crack open more boxes and packs to get these cards. And so it's kind of scummy. Yeah. But that's why you can just buy the cards, secondhand on the secondary market. But yeah, it's so typically they assign whatever rarities to the cards in Japan. They'll typically take note of what are the most popular cards in Japan during that time while they have that few months in between set releases. And then they say, okay, when Konami of America plans to print the cards for us, then they change around the rarities and make the good stuff really expensive, which is unfortunate. But a lot of card games do that, but they just don't have they don't do it through the same way. Essentially, they just do it all at once. There isn't that gap in between Japan and America for the most part.
This is another question I have, which is, has anybody ever tried counterfeit? I mean, obviously people have tried to do this, but is there an actual problem with counterfeit cards? Do people do that? Is there ways around it? How does that all happen with card games in general? Is there a way to provide proof that this is actually an authentic card rather than somebody printing it out of their printer or something?
It's been interesting. I would say counterfeiting was worse back in the day, even though counterfeits have gotten better over time, just in terms of the quality that the counterfeiters can produce. Mm-hmm. But I would say it was probably more abundant earlier on when people were still kind of figuring out what Yu-Gi-Oh was, right? And so it was there wasn't really as many mechanisms for people to understand what a counterfeit card is or whatever. It's really funny. You can look up, there's a counterfeit Exodia. It's called Dark Master Rabbi or something like that. It has some really dumb name, and so there's always a meme with that guy, just because it's it's the most obvious fake looking card, but some people in the day thought it was real. But anyway,
yeah.
So the way that you can tell a real card for the most part is that in the bottom right corner on Yu-Gi-Oh cards, at least, there's a certain holofoil security stamp on every card. And typically by looking at those, if those are, when you shine them in the light a certain way, they just have this very unique reflective pattern that changes as the light refracts on it. That's sort of the security measure that a lot of these trading cards have. Magic actually adopted it a few years ago. They didn't have anything like that before, but then they recently actually took that out of Yu-Gi-Oh's book. And that's sort of the best way to tell, because typically the counterfeits just can't replicate that technology. But that doesn't stop people from trying to print a counterfeit on a real card that has that.
Yeah.
But I would say the counterfeiting issue is pretty well contained compared to the old days. That's just my take on it. I feel that's not really been much of an issue. I feel if anything, the larger issue is theft in these communities, just because players have thousands of dollars worth of cards in a little box, right? And so at any point, if you're at a tournament or you're not in public or anything, there are some people that will travel to these events and they know that there's a lot of money to be had. If someone just accidentally leaves their box out for too long and isn't paying attention, it can just get swiped and then it's gone. And it's very common. It's still to this day. You would think in 2025 people would keep an eye on their stuff. It is extremely common. It's sad, but it still happens.
The other question is, I've heard of Pokemon cards going for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Is there any case of Yu-Gi-Oh cards going for extremely high prices like that?
Yeah, I actually I helped broker the transaction of one of the most expensive cards, as a matter of fact. This is a really funny story. So the card is, I'll send you a picture of it just so you can see it. Give me 1 sec to pull it up here. Were you ever a Dragon Ball Z guy growing up?
Wasn't, no.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Just because the card takes inspiration from that. But here you go. You can see it right here. So the card is called Tyler the Great Warrior. This is a card that has existed since the early 2000s. So the story and the lore behind this is that Tyler Gressley was a kid who had a really rare form of liver cancer. And he was a Make-A-Wish kid. And his Make-A-Wish request was to make his own Yu-Gi-Oh card. So Konami actually granted this. And so they actually had the creator of the game, Kazuki Takahashi, he's passed, unfortunately. They actually worked with the artist of the creator of the game to make this special, one-of-a-kind, unique card for Tyler. And so this is what it was, Tyler the Great Warrior. Tyler ended up beating cancer, which is crazy. So he actually is still with us to this very day. A lot of people on Reddit think he's dead, but no, he's alive. And so he beat cancer and has had this possession of this one-of-one Yu-Gi-Oh card. And you would read about this in Beckett magazine or any of the Yu-Gi-Oh magazines growing up. There were stories about this card, but it was one of those urban legends because no one ever really saw it or knew him unless it was you were in his immediate friend circle, right? So no one actually knew if this was true or not, but they always publicized about it. So I got this email a few years back from someone who claimed to be Tyler's dad, Dave. And he said, hey, we're in possession of Tyler the Great Warrior. That's my son, all this stuff. Dave's a very business oriented person. And he's like, I would like to work with you to help us auction this card off because Tyler wants to, do a lot of really big things with his life, and he doesn't feel like he needs this anymore. And he wants to use that to fund some of his projects that are both like going to help his community and help him do the things that he wants to achieve in life. So I read this email. First of all, my wife brings this to my attention because she's usually in charge of like the business email stuff. Mm-hmm. And she tells me about this, and I have the most bewildered, confounded look on my face because I know what this is. And I am like, there is no fucking way this is real. So I tell her to reply back to her, or to Dave, and I say, send proof with a timestamp, like you're on a dating site. Like, I need you to show me that this is like, that you are not pulling my leg on this.
Yep.
And so 5 minutes later, Dave responds, and sure enough, Tyler the Great Warrior in the slab with a timestamp of the date and everything, and him saying what we said to do. And my jaw just drops. This is literally like one of the holy grails of Yu-Gi-Oh! That I'm looking at here. And I'm like, this is real. And so he wanted to work with me just because he just really liked my content. And he felt that I'd be one of the best people to work on with this. And I'm like, absolutely. Like, this would be fantastic. So I ended up flying out. I got to meet Tyler. I got to meet Dave. We did like a bunch of interviews. There's a video on my channel.
Whoa.
If you want to check it out.
Yeah.
I got to physically hold this card. I have gloves on and everything. So it's like literally this is like a once in a lifetime holy grail moment for the Yu-Gi-Oh community. Something I never thought would happen. And yeah, so we ended up doing a lot of promotional stuff, and we had a big auction for it, and it ended up selling for over 300 grand. So
oh my God.
Yeah. Which to be fair, some people think is actually a bit low. All things considered, but this is sort of when we were in like a bearish market when it came to card games and everything. So it honestly, it could be worth more potentially. It's hard to say. That's just how the market sort of reacted to it. But 300K isn't chump change for a piece of cardboard at the end of the day.
Oh my God.
They were very happy about it. And so Tyler's off doing a lot of things to just to help his community and just the guy got a second chance at life, right? So it's awesome. He's doing really well.
That's amazing. That's crazy. What?
Yeah.
So beyond just these like once in a generation cards, what would you say? Like, are there certain holographic cards that mean more to people? Like, do they do holographics, or are generally cards just all looking kind of the same? How does Yu-Gi-Oh go about that?
That is a very difficult question to answer, only because they have they have a lot of different rarities. So I'll give you the base scale, how it worked for the boomers who know. So a common card is just a regular ass card. There's nothing special about it, no foiling, nothing. It's just a piece of cardboard with ink. Okay. Mm-hmm. A rare card, which they don't really, I think they only do in certain sets now, but before, you would always be guaranteed in a booster pack. It was 9 cards per pack. You got 8 common cards and 1 rare card. And the rare card could be anything on this spectrum. So a rare card, which is what you got most commonly, was just a card, and it had silver lettering on top of it. So where it says like Tyler the Great Warrior on the card, that would just be like silver foiled essentially. And that was a rare card. A super rare card didn't have anything with the name, but the picture itself was holographic. So that's how you knew that was a super rare card. And those look really nice. An ultra rare card, let me go back. A super rare was a 1 in 6 chance per pack. So you'd always get your 8 commons and 1 rare guaranteed, but there's a 1 in 6 chance that the rare card would be a super rare card, just as an example. An ultra rare.
It wouldn't be a rare and a super rare. It would replace the rare with the super rare 1 in 6.
Correct.
Okay.
In the old days, yes. Now they actually they've changed it where they do a rare and a super rare. So, but I mean that's why I said it's kind of complicated. I'll give you the simple version. An ultra rare, which is a 1 in 12 chance to replace the rare. Not only is the picture holographic, but then the title of the card would be in gold foiling. And then a secret rare, which was a 1 in 24, which is how many packs are in a box, which is why it's 1 in 24. So there would, on average, be 1 secret rare per box. And even then, that wasn't always guaranteed. Mm-hmm. A secret rare has very glittery, shiny title text. And then the picture itself is also very glittery and shiny as well. So that was like your base scale. And then over time, they added more rarities to the game. So later on, about a few years after release, they added ultimate rares. Ultimate rares are some of the most beautiful looking cards because They're all foil. Like the name is like gold. The picture is foil, but it's like textured foiled. So it has like this crazy depth to the card because like the light just hits it and it refracts and it looks like it has actual texture.
Whoa.
And so that's my favorite rarity personally.
So is it like with any card, or they just do it with certain monsters that even have these super ultimate rare stuff?
So initially, ultimate rares, every card in the set had an ultimate rare equivalent, which was really cool. So that means that you could get a super rare card, but it had an ultimate rare version that was like the high rarity expensive version.
Whoa.
So that's why people really liked it, because if you wanted the cheaper version, you could buy that. But if you want like the flex version, you had like the ultimate rare version, which is really cool.
And
then they came out with sure.
No, well, I was just gonna ask, like, how much would those go for? Like how much? What's the price differential of just like the basic versus the ultimate rares?
Ooh, it really depends. Especially nowadays, because like some of those old ultimate rares go for like real money because they're just hard to get now. But like back in the day, I'll give you a good example. There would be like let's say there's like a super rare card. That might be like $15 to $20 for that card. Not bad. Nothing like super crazy. The ultimate rare equivalent of that might go for like 60, 70-ish. And that's like back in the day. Nowadays, some of those ultimate rares might go for like several $100s because they're just so rare now, especially to find in good condition. So if you bought in early, you're making dividends nowadays. And then the last rarity I'll say, because like I said, I could go on forever. There's a ton. They came out with ghost rares. These are really weird cards. They use this very interesting like foil technology that the card is almost three-dimensional. I don't really know how to describe it. But when you look at it in the light and you just turn the card back and forth, it looks like, those little images that it's like three different images, but when you turn the thing, it like goes back and forth between them.
Yeah.
I forget the name for those things. It kind of looks like that. That's like the best way I can describe it, but it's all one image. Those were one per case. So a case is 12 booster boxes, and a booster box is 24 packs. So a ghost rare was 1 in 288 booster packs.
Oh my God.
And those now, especially, those are worth thousands of dollars. Just because they are very hard. They're very sought after and very hard to find.
Holy hell. Okay, so I just looked up ghost Yu-Gi-Oh cards. And
okay. Sure.
I'm just seeing. Okay, so I'm looking at like just this thing. It's just saying prices of things. One is like $1,000. One is $340. One's $7,000 something. There's one there's 2010 Yu-Gi-Oh Chaos Emperor of the Dragon Armageddon, $50,000. Is that like just out of control? Like, is that just like a clear scam, or is that like
that sounds
legit?
like a scam to me?
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds like they're trimming your armor for sure.
Okay, I'm just like,
so I don't know why that one is listed there.
Yeah, I'm just, this is the kind of, because I wouldn't know either way. I mean, I would expect like maybe 1,000 or something to be, reasonable.
Yeah, definitely the older ghost rares are several thousand because those are the most sought after and they're some of the first ones. They've done newer ghost rares because they've done some different sets that bring like they make like a bunch of cards ghost rare. So those are more common, so they're not as like highly collectible. So they might still fetch, $100, $300, something like that, but they're not nearly as desirable as like the very original ghost rare cards.
I see.
But nowadays they have like 40 or 50. They did something called the rarity collection that there was each card came in 7 different rarities. It was ridiculous. So now it's just they just go crazy with it now, unfortunately.
I want to ask, what is your favorite card? Besides the Tyler the Great, if that was in there, like, but just
no, that wasn't
cards.
it. Sorry,
Okay.
Tyler, that wasn't it. I'll show you my favorite card. I was gonna pull it up really quick. Here we go. My fans that are listening to this already know what I'm pulling up here. There we go. So my favorite card is this guy. His name is Breaker the Magical Warrior. He just looks badass.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
This is like a classic looking card too.
Classic Yu-Gi-Oh card. Yeah, just like the garish looking armor, just very anime looking, cool name. Very good. His card was actually banned at one point. It was actually it was that good of a card.
Whoa.
But not for any particular reason. I just always really love the artwork and just the composition of the artwork. Just the purple background's really neat.
And he's rocking the Addy Long as well. So.
Yeah, he's got the Addy Long sword. Yeah, yeah.
The Addy longest sword. You've seen that Reddit meme, the one where it just like keeps standing.
Goes through the entire inventory. Yeah. But no, Breaker's cool. He has like his own moment in the anime that's like him just like completely like wrecking a guy. He just keeps like hitting him over and over and over again, like overkilling him. It's really funny. And yeah, no, just a really cool card. Just a really cool card.
Respect.
Yeah.
So okay. So just looking at this card, I have another question for you. It's just
sure.
what is the star rating up there for, and how far does it go up?
Oh, sure. So the stars are levels. So how levels work? Do you recall how I said how you have a normal summon once per turn?
Okay.
So when you're able to do that one normal summon per turn, the monster has to have 4 or less stars in order to do that. So Breaker is one of the things that you can just play straight out of your hand. If a monster has 5 or 6 stars, you have to do what's called a tribute. So you'd have to tribute Breaker off of your field, for instance, to play the bigger 5, 6 star guy because he has bigger stats, he has a better effect, something along those lines. And then if it has 7, 8, or 9 stars, then you have to tribute 2 monsters in order to bring it out. So that's sort of the way they like temper the power of some of these older cards. Was that Blue Eyes White Dragon, for instance, that has 8 stars, so you'd have to tribute 2 of your other guys to bring Blue Eyes out onto the field. And that's why Blue Eyes has 3,000 attack versus this guy only has 16. So he just has a big number basically.
So how far does it go up?
12 is the maximum because that's all that fits on the card.
And what's the most powerful like standalone card? Is there one that just stands out as like, okay, this is just the GOAT?
Oof. Most powerful in what sense?
I want to like, I guess it's so to my normie eyes, I want to see a card that's basically like 12 stars, just dominant, just like what the hell is this? Like it has extreme attack and defense. Like is there like a card like that that's just like out of control?
What is the ultimate Timmy card? That's a good question.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm asking, actually.
That's what you want. Yeah, that's what you want.
Exactly.
It's a hard question because I don't really think about that too often. Let me pull up a website and I'll look for it. We can keep talking about other stuff.
Yeah.
I will find it for you.
Because
I know the answer that I would give that isn't the Timmy answer.
Okay.
I know like the card that everyone loathes. I can give you that one.
What is it?
You want that one?
Yeah. Let's see that one first, and then if you see another one that's like just out of control, looking for the little Timmys.
Sure. This is the most. This is the EOC card of Yu-Gi-Oh.
Okay. Max C. So this is what everyone loathes, like when they see it in their opponent's hand, like if they lay it down.
Correct. You love it when you play it. You hate it when your opponent plays it. Yeah.
Okay. So why is it exactly?
Give it a quick read down there at the bottom.
So it says, quick effect. You can send this card from your hand to the GY. What's that? Graveyard. This turn, each time your opponent special summons a monster, immediately draw 1 card. You can only use this effect of Max C once per turn.
So this is a card. I told you special summoning is no longer special, and you're special summoning a metric shit ton all the time. This is a very divisive card because if Yu-Gi-Oh, you do not draw cards very often. Pot of Greed, the card that everyone knows, is banned, and all that does is let you draw an extra card, right? This card, theoretically, you could draw like 10, 15, 20 cards off of it if your opponent just keeps special summoning, right? So it puts you into this lose-lose situation if your opponent uses it on you, because if you do a play and your opponent uses Max C to draw cards, you either have to stop playing and basically end your turn, which means you're a sitting duck and you're probably going to die, or you keep playing, let your opponent draw their whole deck, basically, and then you still die because they drew their whole deck and they have everything they need to kill you anyway. So anytime this card gets played, it's like a lose-lose situation, and everyone hates it.
And it's not banned. It's still legal.
So that's very interesting. It's banned for us. It is legal in the Asian territories, and it's also legal on our online client. It's called Master Duel. So depending on how you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh, it may or may not be banned. But us being here in the non-Asian territories, we are very happy that this card does not exist.
Now, would there be like an ultimate rare of this that looks all shiny and stuff? Or is that not the case with these kinds of...
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So Something like that is just like, oh yeah, this is awesome.
The ultimate rare copies of this card, I think at one point went for almost $1,000 a copy.
That is awesome.
Yeah, but there was a lot of copies of this that there was even common printing, so it was pricey even when it was like first released, but it was never ridiculous to the point that it was completely inaccessible for everyone. But yeah, this card is like if you were gonna ask me the best Yu-Gi-Oh card ever, this would probably the most egregious Yu-Gi-Oh card ever. Yeah.
What is this like image? It's just like a TV on a stand with a dresser. Like what is this?
So it's like the C is like a cockroach. So the little eyes are like little bugs because it's an insect. So they're little cockroaches that are like coming into the house. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. Interesting. So it's so fascinating. Like, I mean, we see this with like any card game. It's just like it starts just getting out of like even the fantasy realm. It's like, what are we looking at anymore? It's just like just any image of anything.
Yeah, they similar to Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh runs out of ideas from time to time, and that's when they start, like Pokemon, they'll start picking household objects. So, I'm still looking for your crazy Timmy card. There's a few. I guess this is a pretty good one. I guess I'll show you this.
Let's see it.
Okay, this is a more recent one. Try to look up a good image for you here. There we go. This has a crazy rarity to it too. You'll be able to see that in the picture. This is called Dragon Master Magia.
Oh yeah, this is what I'm talking about.
This is the Blue Eyes White Dragon.
Yeah.
This is the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon fused together with one of Yugi's monsters up there on top, the Magician of Black Chaos. So it's like Yugi and Kaiba's, both of their like ace monsters, like coming together into this crazy thing.
So 12 stars, 5,000 attack, 4,000 defense for those on Spotify listening. Just
you don't have to read the effect. There's a lot of text. Don't worry. For the most part, this card is awful, but there's actually a deck nowadays, or very soon, I should say, that is actually going to be able to play this. And this card is actually crazy if you're able to summon it. This card is very hard to summon, but that deck actually summons it very easily. So people are not looking forward to playing against this because this thing is a menace.
That's crazy. Yeah,
that's your big Timmy card.
Yeah, this is exactly what I was imagining too. It's just something super shiny, blue and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, these go for quite a bit too, because I think it only has one printing currently, and it's in this super. I told you about that like ghost rare. It's kind of like a equivalent. I think it's called it's a Starlight rare. Quarter Century Secret rare. That was for the 25th anniversary. And this card, because it only has one printing, and it's I think it's like one per case or something like that. The lowest you can buy one of these for is, good. It went up, down. The cheapest one I see is $850.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy. So,
yeah.
Here's another question. How much have you spent roughly, if you're willing to admit, on Yu-Gi-Oh cards over your life?
That's a good question. How much have I spent? So one of the reasons I was also very popular on YouTube, especially as I was growing, still growing, but in the early days, is I was very vocal and like actively criticizing Konami's just business decisions because no one else really did that. And I felt it was important that there was a voice that did, sort of like how, in old school RuneScape, how everyone's like on Reddit, always like complaining about things or even making videos, right? When they have critiques about things.
Yeah.
I was one of the only people really doing that at the time. And I got a lot of flack like from the company for that as a result. But a lot of people really appreciated it because there wasn't really this dissenting opinion on a lot of the decisions that they were making that weren't exactly, in the best interest of the community. And obviously it's, a business and I get all that, but that doesn't mean that there isn't like a middle ground that we can find that everyone can be happy.
Yep.
So I was always very vocal about not buying sealed product. So like booster packs, booster boxes, etc. And I would always tell people to buy the single cards off of the secondary market. And obviously Konami doesn't like that because it's very anti-business for them because that's how they make their money. And so, but people always appreciated that I was always giving constructive criticism about that because it is, first of all, let's be honest, Yu-Gi-Oh cards, Pokemon cards, whatever, it's basically gambling for kids, right?
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's loot boxes that came out before loot boxes. And it's something that you could spend hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to get a singular card and you could still not get it. But why do that when you could just go on eBay or any of these other, second-party websites, third-party websites, and just buy the individual cards that you want. And you can actually make sure your money is well spent. And so, like I said, no one was really like saying these things before. And so a lot of people just really had a lot of faith and credibility built up with me because I would be honest about this stuff. And so people think I have this like secret vault of all these like extremely rare cards that I've spent, millions of dollars on. I don't. I have a very small collection as far as a Yu-Gi-Oh player is concerned because I have some shiny cards that I like. I have the cards that are sentimental to me. When I did do the few product openings that I had done, I might still have the stuff from that. But for the most part, I would only really buy the cards that I wanted to play with at the time when I was playing a lot more competitively, or even now if I play in the retro formats. So in terms of like my 25 years playing, how much have I spent? It's probably in the thousands. I mean, it's over the course of 25 years. I wouldn't be surprised if it's that much. Are we getting into 5 digits, like 10K plus? Maybe. Again, if you divide that over 25 years, right? 10K divided by 25 years, that's only $400 a year. That's not really a ton. In terms of like a hobby, right? That's not really that much. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's in like, the 10 to 20K range. But again, over the course of my entire time playing this game, not really that much, I think, in the grand scheme of things. And a lot of the things have held value over time because a lot of the things I pick up are higher end, nicer things that are going to retain value. So, or if I know I'm not going to play for it very long, I get the lowest rarity possible. So, and then I don't really lose out on much. So yeah, it's if I ever want to cash out of the game, I can just sell off my collection and I probably recoup some of it back, if not make money, because over time, since I've been in so early, I've had the opportunity to pick up some of these extremely old, rare cards that now fetch a pretty penny because you can't get them anymore.
Now, do you use like display cases at all? Like, are you kind of like into the look and like collectors sort of position where you like to have like your display cases of like the best cards and stuff, or are you not really that kind of collector?
Not really.
Okay.
I play when I play with my cards because I'm one of the people who believes cards should be played with because they're game pieces at the end of the day, and that's fine. Not everyone has that opinion. Some people want the PSA 10, pristine, never touched air version of a card. Sure, like that's okay. I don't have any qualms with that. But for me, I feel like the card should be played. And so when I do play, I bust out my cards, I play with them, and then I usually just put them back until the next time I play with them.
It's so fascinating that like these card games are still going on. Do you think if you like, would you have as much passion for Yu-Gi-Oh, do you think, if you weren't in the content creation sphere with it? Like, do you think you'd still be pretty consistently playing it and stuff and getting involved in the community?
It's an interesting question because I feel like the more I've gotten entrenched with YouTube, the less I actually play Yu-Gi-Oh, which is funny.
That's generally what happens with content creators, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily, but I think it's just more of a shift in focus, if you will. I am very grateful that I chose a game that is probably not going anywhere anytime soon because the big three, as we call them, Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, they've been around for 25 plus years. Magic's been around for 30. They make, I don't know if you know this, Yu-Gi-Oh makes more money for Konami than slot machines.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so think about, we're talking serious money. They have access to legal money printers, which is ridiculous. So these games are not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful that I happen to so luckily pick a medium that is the case, because I know some people might get into Hearthstone or Legends of Runeterra for like the digital card games, or these newer card games like Dragon Ball or One Piece or any of these other games. And some of them it's still TBD on how long they're going to stand the test of time. But historically, a lot of card games fall subject to what's called the 2-year curse, where they don't make it past the first 2 years and they just go into the graveyard with every other card game that people tried. But the big three have withstood the test of time. And so I definitely think it helps that the game is still growing. I mean, the tournament's attendance numbers keep just going up. The sales for these games are still incredibly impressive. And there's no reason to believe, aside from, you'll have your people on Reddit that are like, oh, this game sucks, it's going to die next year. The amount of times I've heard that throughout my lifespan of playing this game is hilarious. It's actually just a joke.
I hear that. I hear that on my OSRS YouTube channels. Like,
yeah, I'll see it on Reddit all the time. Yeah, and so, yeah, it definitely helps. And so, I definitely think it'd be a lot harder if I was supporting a game that was pretty considerably on the decline. And that's also the nature of content creation, right? Sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes you don't. So
it's true. But you have become like a voice for Yu-Gi-Oh. So I think, and I kind of see it the way, you know, like if old school ever did, you know, somehow disappear, which literally makes no sense to me. Like I don't even know how that would work exactly. But even if it did, it's like you would have this sort of like mass migration, I imagine, to a game similar or to a new private server that everyone's. It's like, it's not like as soon as the game vanishes, like the community just all disappears. It's like people kind of go with what the next thing is ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating because Master Duel is our online client that we can play with one another that Konami made. They only made that client within the past 3 years. I think the 3-year anniversary is actually coming up at the time that we're recording this. Prior to that, we literally had bootleg online Yu-Gi-Oh! Run by some random people and the servers like in the middle of Malaysia or something. And that was like how you would play Yu-Gi-Oh! Online. There was like no other option. And so for content creation for the first several years, that's what we used. And it isn't pretty, but in terms of like functionality, it basically replicated how you could play Yu-Gi-Oh! And we were still able to make content with that very basic rudimentary tool at our disposal. So it really just shows to, and old school RuneScape content's very similar, it really just shows to the creativity that content creators have when it comes to making new content, that when you're forced and limited with your options, it really allows you to sort of come up with these really ingenious ways to make entertaining stuff for people to watch. Totally. Yeah.
Okay, I'll cross it by you. Is there anything else you want to touch on before we kind of wrap things up? I feel like we've kind of touched on everything that we kind of set out to, and I've actually loved a lot of the little angles we've taken with the conversation. But I want to cross it by you before we kind of wrap things up. Anything of importance?
I don't think so particularly. I mean, if anything, for anyone listening, I just want to thank the old school RuneScape community, if anything, because so much of the content that I've created has basically just taken inspiration from a lot of the content that's come out. And they always say, what is it? Creativity is just like taking two things and putting them together, right? Mm-hmm. That's the Yugification of the old school content. That's essentially my MO. It's kind of like a running joke now in my inner circles, where they're always like, oh, which old school series is Simo going to knock off next? But they love it. That's like the irony of the whole thing. Is like, they want it. So yeah. It's funny. My most recent series is basically just Gillinor Games, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Edition. We call it King of Games. And so it's literally exactly that. It's literally just Yu-Gi-Oh! Gillinor Games. And people are like, I didn't know I needed this, but this is like the greatest thing ever. So thank you, Soup, for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't really think there's much else to say, but it's been fantastic being on and just yapping about old school RuneScape and Yu-Gi-Oh! For a couple hours.
Yeah, this was actually phenomenal. This is so cool talking with you. And I'm just looking forward to seeing your further growth as a content creator. I mean, your channel is just popping off, and you just, again, like I said earlier on, you radiate that passion. So keep up the great work. And
thank you. Yours as well. You're like 25K now. You're doing great.
Yeah, we're getting up there. It's a slow burn, but I'm happy with the growth, and I'm happy with
3K subber. I'm a 3K subber.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. No, I'm honestly like honored that you've seen my content, and you're an avid enjoyer. So thank you for supporting. Yeah. And for those still listening, we're going to have all of Simo's links down in the description. So I'm going to have you just throw all of those in the DM for me afterwards. So I'll just have those all included. Go give him a follow, guys. If you have any sort of desire to follow some Yu-Gi-Oh! Content, he is the man to go to on YouTube. So definitely check it out.
I don't know about that, but I appreciate it.
No. He definitely is. He's just being humble. But Simo, thank you very much for coming on today. And this is awesome. Maybe we'll have to get you on again in like a year or so.
Hey, I'd love to. Thank you so much. Maybe I'll be making old school content by then. Maybe I'll have my Infernal Cape by then.
Yes. I'd have to talk about it, your whole Infernal journey.
For sure. Awesome. Thanks so much, though. This is a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, guys. We'll catch you in the next one. Peace.